Hi, Sherry. Good to be
Hi,
with
how
you.
are you?
Welcome everyone to the WikiCari Festival. This is the virtual festival we're holding with the Wikipedia community and the Caribbean community. And I'm going to let Sherry introduce the idea of this entire concept first, and then we'll talk about some logistics of how we're going to run the whole day. So Sherry, introduce us to WikiCari and what we'll be doing today.
Thanks so much for having us today. This is an exciting day. This is our first WikiCari Fest online. And I'm Sherry Antwine. I'm the lead organizer of Wikimedians of the Caribbean. And a lot of your audience may know me from AfriCrowd as well. And so the idea for the WikiCari Fest happened because, every year all over the world, there are carnivals, there are different festivals to celebrate the Caribbean, many of them happening around this time of year. In the United States, for example, it happens on the last weekend of summer, and in early September. And unfortunately, this year, because of COVID-19, we haven't been able to have those festivals. We haven't been able to jump up with our brethren in the, in my area where I am right now around New York in the Parkway, or if you're in the Caribbean, a lot of the festivals were canceled there as well. So the idea came to have a festival online because we still wanted to gather, we still wanted to celebrate the Caribbean. And although it may not be as magnificent as, being able to be in the parade or whatnot, we do want to celebrate Caribbean culture. And we also are excited about the Caribbean community on Wikipedia, which is actually, WikiCari is fairly new. We started during WikiConference North America, a bunch of us gathered. And then in the spring of that year, the following year, we became a user group. And so, and that was in 2018. So we're still young in the community, but there are Caribbean Wikimedians who have been in the community for a while. And so today, we're excited to have some great guests, both within the Wiki community and without, to talk a little bit about the Caribbean, to talk about Caribbean culture, but mostly, to celebrate as best that we can the Caribbean in the Wiki community and without, and to hopefully engage the community in a greater discussion about the importance of inclusive of representation of Caribbean ideas and so forth, and history on Wikipedia. And so we're excited to be here today on Wikipedia Weekly, and we're excited to have a full day of discussions and activities ahead. And also, if you stick around, you might learn something, because we have some people from groups within the Wikipedia community that you can jump in on and participate in. So without further ado, I'd love to hear from the rest of our crew from the WikiCari leadership, and it looks like we've got Brendan with us. Okay, great.
Hi, everyone. I don't know if you guys can hear me clearly. So my name is Brandon Sullivan. I'm also Wikipedian, wider Wikimedian as well. I am the communications guy here at Wikimedians of the Caribbean. I've been a part of the community for about 5 years, and with Wikimedians of the Caribbean, it's been over a year. It's coming and being a part of this community has really been such a very important and very vital thing, especially as the Caribbean, as a concept, has largely been overlooked in wider conversations about the community, the Wikimedia and the Wikipedia community. Also, in having something like the WikiCari Festival, is also pretty important to understand that because we've not had that face-to-face kind of contact as a result of the ongoing situations that's going around worldwide. This moment is really here to allow us as a community to really thread the needle across all the various composite parts of Caribbean culture, not just in the Anglophone Caribbean, not just in Barbados or Trinidad or Jamaica, but in the Dominican Republic, in Cuba, in all different parts of the Caribbean experience. And thankfully today you all are going to be seeing just a bit of that. We have guests who would have, we've touched base with across the Caribbean and Cuba, from Dominica, which of course our hi Emma, of course the our lead organizer, she would have of course come from Dominica. I'm coming live from Jamaica. I have my flag here. And
Hey!
so it's a all around Caribbean affair, and of course we have our friends and colleagues. Of course, Andrew's joining us from DC. Richard is joining us from New York, and we have a couple of other people who are also here. I'm not from Kingston. I'm here from Montego Bay, which is on the other side of the island. Well, of course, I lived in Kingston for 4 years, so it is what it is. But yeah, it's really, really amazing to be here. Really incredible to be here, and I'm just looking forward to that fantastic and invigorating conversation that we're going to have today.
Great. Thanks so much, Brandon and Sherry. So some of the things that you've seen already is that we are actually broadcasting on several channels at once through this system called StreamYard. So some of you might be watching us on Facebook, some on YouTube, or some on Twitter via it's called Periscope. So the great thing about this is that you can chat back to us. And we encourage you, tell us where you're watching from, especially if you're from the Caribbean, or even if you're not in the Caribbean right now, if you have some ties, let us know your ties to the Caribbean area. And we can bring those comments up on the screen, which is pretty cool. So whether you respond on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter, we can bring up your comments and questions or any other observations on screen here. So that's one of the powers of this system that we're using called StreamYard. If you're on Facebook, if you want your face or your name to show like that, you do have to go to streamyard.com/Facebook to allow StreamYard to see your face and identity. Otherwise, we'll kind of see like an anonymous user there, which is okay, but we'd love to see who you are. So if you go to streamyard.com/Facebook, it'll ask you, can we see your face and name when we put that comment up on the screen? And we'd love to do that. So please let us know where you're coming from. And this is great. We're cycling through a lot of folks from different areas around the world. Some of these folks, Sherry and Brandon might know already, or some of these might be new folks who are really interested in what we're doing here. And I think Sherry and Brandon, you both have pointed this out before, but we're actually reaching more folks in some weird way during COVID-19 because we're not doing anything in person, but that lets this get out to a wider audience, right?
Agreed. I completely agree. It's
and
I think it's one of. Go ahead. Yeah,
I just wanted to big up Guadeloupe. I'm seeing Trinidad. I'm seeing the Netherlands. I'm seeing, we've got people from everywhere. A lot of Caribbean lovers and people in the Caribbean, people in the diaspora. So it's good to see so many faces, and thanks for joining us today.
Nice.
We're seeing some familiar faces. Here's Jason joining in from Portland. We're also going to be joined by a couple of other people. We're going to be joined by Pete, who's also from Portland, later on in the broadcast. So it's going to be a really amazing time here, and I look forward to what we're going to cover here today. So I'm going to hand it back over to you, Sherry, and let's get the show on the road.
Okay, so we have a great day lined up. If you all will go to, we can join us 3 ways. You can join us on YouTube, and I believe the YouTube link is, well, first, join us on our main page, because that's where you will get all of the information for today. You'll even get some insight in some of the people who you'll be hearing speak. And it's live, so it may be changing throughout the day as well. So join us on Wiki. So we have a meta page, which is a page like a meetup page in the Wikimedia community. And so to get to that, go to bit.ly/FC WC FEST. Is there a way to put that on the screen, Andrew, just so that people can get there? You can see it right now. That's the page for today, and it has the full schedule of what's going to be happening today. We're going to be here from 1:30 all the way up to 5 p.m. Eastern Time, or AST. And also, throughout the day, you'll get the opportunity to add your ideas on this page on Wiki of things that people can edit, things that you heard during the discussion that you'd like to learn more about. We might put the link there. You can also cycle through it and get some ideas about some pages to learn more about the Caribbean. We're going to be talking about culture, food, music, famous people, all different kinds of things about the Caribbean today. And you can add to our list, or you can just cycle through it and see if there's some things you want to learn more about. Now, for example, if you'll take a look at the list, we have stuff on folklore, on food. We've got all different kinds of Caribbean food, but there could be more. We've got ideas about literature and the performing arts, news and media. Later on today, we're going to be hearing from some people concerning getting more newspapers, for example, from the Caribbean on Wikipedia. We're going to be hearing from Rubadiri Victor, who's going to be talking to us. He is our guest speaker. He's going to be joining us in about 15 minutes or so. After that, we're going to be talking about the music of the Caribbean. I think it would be wonderful for you guys to tell us some of your favorite music from the Caribbean, your favorite artists. I, for example, being from Dominica, I really love Exile One. I love my bouillon music. Let's also talk about the actual ecology of the Caribbean. And the Caribbean actually is a really important place in the environment as well. And we're going to be hearing from someone who will be talking about that. Finally, we're going to be talking about the diverse cultures of the Caribbean. WikiCari is made up of some wonderful folks. And we are, today, this event is mostly going to be in English. But what we're trying to do, we'd like to grow it even more to have an even wider representation of the full languages that are available in the Caribbean. I see we've had some people from Guadeloupe. We've had we're also going to connect to someone from Cuba. We've worked with people in the Dominican Republic, and we had a great event in Puerto Rico, for example. And we love our Jamaican brethren, and we've worked in Trinidad and Tobago, and we'd love to move even farther as we're growing as a community on Wikipedia. So we'd love to hear from everyone, and we'd love to hear more about the culture. So if you'd like to chime in and talk with us, please put your comments in YouTube or in the StreamYard. And I believe we should be able to connect with you that way for Facebook as well. And we'd love to hear your comments about the different cultures of the Caribbean. And then afterwards, we're going to move into, at around the 4 o'clock mark, we're going to be talking about how to get involved in the Wiki community. It's a segment where we'll hear from a couple of groups that are doing some activities that you can be involved in, as well as ours, and ways you can stay in touch with the community. And also, if you're in the Wiki community and you have something that you want to talk about that is happening fairly soon that people can be involved, please join us here today, and we'd love to hear from you as well. And lastly, we're going to be closing at around, we're going to hear about some of the changes happening in the Wiki community during our and hear from a speaker concerning the 2030 strategy. And then finally, we're going to be closing at around 5. So like I said, you have a full day. You're welcome to join us. Pop in, pop out, get yourself some food, get your favorite Caribbean dish, get some rum, get some punch, get some, get some whatever you want, and come hang out with us and talk to us. And it's just we're trying to make it a time that's open and welcoming to everyone, regardless of your background. We're all here because we love the Caribbean and want to continue to make sure that it's represented and present in the Wikiverse. So without further ado, we're going to be hearing from Rubadiri soon, but Ian, is Ian still here with us today yet?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes.
Ian, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Ian Ramjohn. I am a Trinidad and Tobago. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago, a San Fernando native, and I've been a Wikipedian for 16 years now. I'm based in Michigan. I went to UWI, St. Augustine, and I'm a plant ecologist by training, which is what brought me to Michigan in the first place. I discovered Wikipedia in 2004, a long, long time ago. And the first thing I went to was the Trinidad and Tobago page. And I noticed that the information about Trinidad and Tobago about the local government was completely out of date. It was a decade out of date even then. And so I decided to change it, update it to the regional corporations model, and that was changed. It was, to me, a life-changing experience to not to have to depend on somebody outside in the first world to beg for the right to update the way we were perceived in the world. And I've been hooked, and I've been there ever since. I've been involved with in the leadership team of the Wikimedians of the Caribbean, and it's an honor to be here. I'm really glad we were able to pull this off.
So I was wondering, as a Wikipedian, when you saw, well, I know Ian, so I know some of the things he's done. But I just want to introduce it to everyone because I think you've done some really amazing work on Wiki concerning the Caribbean. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the ways that you've engaged Wikipedia concerning the Caribbean?
So I honestly feel like my biggest contribution is a list of my biggest single contribution is actually a list of poems of the Caribbean, which is a featured list on Wikipedia, which is the highest level. But a lot of what I've done is just little bits and pieces of contributing to these articles, trying to keep them online, trying to clean up when the odd things come along. I created early on an awful lot of stubs about Caribbean people. Early on, I felt like I was the only one adding Caribbean history, and I just took Michael Anthony's historical dictionary of Trinidad and said, okay, who needs to be in here? I took Kurt Magu's book about Trinidadian politics and said, okay, how can I create articles about, how can I use this information to create articles about Trinidadian 20th century history? And more recently, I've delved into things like the National Union of Freedom Fighters, which was a guerrilla group active in Trinidad in the 70s that I knew almost nothing about. There was very little out there. I didn't hear anything about them growing up. And I started digging, and I got it up to good article status, which is sort of the second best status of information. And I feel like bit by bit, I've added things. I've tried to stand up for the developing world's perspective when we're building rules, when we're talking about sourcing and so on. And hopefully I've been a voice in the community over the last 16 years for the third world's perspective, because Wikipedia has a developed world, a first world perspective bias. It comes from the fact that so many people come from there. It's not a hard bias, but it's a white supremacist world that we live in, and you have to actively push back, otherwise you just go along with the flow of the way things have always been.
So what's your what is one? Let's take a
Great,
look
thank you,
here.
Ian. Yeah, go ahead, Sherry. You want to take a look at the article?
Yeah, because we're looking at this article right now, and I'd like for everyone to see. For example, Ian's going to talk some more later on about the ecology of the Caribbean, but this is an example of just even looking at what articles in the on Wikipedia look like, and different ways that you can just really get lost in just one article. All of that blue represents areas that you can jump into, like a portal into another world. You know, if you're at home and you've been stuck inside and you can't really do much because of the way things are, this is just one page and you can get lost in it. You can, let's see, let's scroll up. And if you look at what's a blue one that we can take a look here? Why don't you yell one out, Brendan or Ian? But I just
You want to
think
look
that
at a
if
article
you
related
really,
to the Caribbean?
sure, yeah, just anything in this one, and it's and really when you're looking at these blue words, you're really looking at a door to something else. So it's a door into more information. And Ian, you also had something, did something called the Wiki Project Caribbean, right?
I don't think I started it, but I've been sort of around and trying to promote it bit by bit. It's a lot of there's so much that you're pulled in 100 different ways, and it's not always you don't always have the time to devote to everything you want to. But there's a Caribbean Wiki project. There's a Trinidad and Tobago Wiki project. There was a time when I hung around the Puerto Rico Wiki project when there was just less in Wikipedia. But as the community has grown, there's less need for me, and there's a lot of very active people in Trinidad now who are also chipping away at making things better. So.
Yes. And each project is an opportunity for anyone who's interested to be involved, which is great. So how about you, Brendan? What is what's your history with Wikipedia and the Caribbean? And Andrew, I don't want to take away from how you normally run things, but I just think it's so interesting to learn about the talking heads that we have here today.
Sure. So I really started editing on Wikipedia, I think, well, I was an IP editor for a very long time. So I started out, I think, about like 2006, 7, just, I don't know, it's about like 10, 11, thereabout. I was super interested in Wikipedia and what it offered, especially because, I just naturally like to, go down rabbit holes of knowledge and so on. So that's when I initially started out. But formally speaking, I created my accounts actually in 2015. I think this month will be the 5th year that I'd have had an official account. I think I probably do have another account, but it's somewhere in the ether of the universe, the internet universe. I don't know where it is. But yeah, so mostly my focus on Wikipedia is actually quite general. So I find myself working on articles, for instance, in telecoms, mostly related to the Caribbean, of course, but stuff like telecommunications, aviation, general history, for instance. I've moonlit, in being an active contributor in the Trinidad and Tobago article. Also in Jamaica, my hometown, just different things, different bits and pieces. And that's how I got my start until, things started to take on mass. And then, then I started becoming, more involved in the community since then. I think one page that I'm most thrilled about is, of course, through, no real connection to this. I just found it quite interesting that at this one point in time, the largest telecoms provider in the Caribbean just did not have a Wikipedia page. So I was like, okay, well, they had one before, but then they went through a merger, and those who are from the Caribbean would perhaps know what I'm talking about. In fact, what I'll do is I'm gonna look that up, and I'm gonna share that with the rest of us. Just give me a second here. So whilst doing that, this was something that I started, I think, in about late 2015. And since then, of course, I'm not really au fait with the exact statistics of what, the average pages are, views of that page are, but it's gotten to a point where it's now taken on mass in a way that I hadn't envisaged, which is great. Let me just bring that up right here.
Yeah,
so
feel free to share your screen while you're doing that.
Sure. So this is the page that I had just went through and started. And of course, the best thing about Wikipedia, which is something I want to point out, is the fact that no one owns a page. This is an open project. This is a collaborative. This is a joint effort with everyone around the world. So, this is something that I started, in my bedroom. And it's now taken on, just like all this mass, all this information, which, by the way, is really important to note, because to get this information meant that I would have had to scrub through endless articles, spend an exhaustive amount of time trying to get, citations and empirical knowledge to really build on something of this nature. But even so, it's still not perfect. This still needs, if you look at the very top here, and we have notations as to what needs to be done here, needs to be cleaned up. I personally haven't been in this article for a really long time. And I think this speaks to a wider issue and something that we are trying to address here as Wikimedians of the Caribbean as it relates to engaging the region in becoming active participants, active knowledge seekers and knowledge creators in the community. Being just this group of people is not enough. Other communities have established norms, established, ideas of, contributing, and that isn't something that we've seen here very often. This group of people here is the exception rather than the rule, and we're trying to turn that, into, the inverse. We want to make it, the rule, and not contributing the exception. So, I think, whilst these contributions might be, somewhat, important, but I think the wider conversation that we're trying to have here and that we are going to be having here is talking about how we can connect the various parts of the conversation in the Caribbean to also being something that is reflected in the wider knowledge base that exists on the internet. Just a quick anecdote, every time someone Googles something, for instance, you would be able to see just a quick bite of that information in what we call an info box. And more often than not, that info box is actually populated by Wikipedia, information that is pulled over from Wikipedia. And I think the lag time between making an edit on Wikipedia and that appearing in the info box, or even on an Alexa or a Siri or Google Assistant, is somewhere in the region of about 3 to 5 minutes, which is crazy when you think about it. This is something that is very important to driving knowledge imperatives, knowledge creation, and knowledge growth around the world. And if the Caribbean is not participating in the level that it should, it then therefore means that it is not just left out of the conversation just from a numbers point of view, but it'll also be left out of the conversation because of the fact that it has not that critical mass, and that, that the body of information to really help drive imperatives to actively contribute and create that knowledge. So, us being here and talking here is, good, but we're also here to really encourage and to spark that, movement towards really being active contributors to knowledge globally.
Yes.
Great. Thanks so much, Rand.
And also, yeah. And also during this time, I'm seeing there are some people who have been commenting, and we have some people who are starting some pages, it looks like. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, we had some
we
questions from folks
ahead.
about how to make an account, and fortunately, we have some folks in our communities that are showing them how to create those things. So keep the questions coming, keep the comments coming. As you can see
Yes.
from the ticker at the bottom, we have a hashtag. So if you're on social media, please do retweet this if you're in Periscope, or send it out on YouTube, or share it on Facebook. We want more folks to see this, and you've got this hashtag as well. So thank you, Sherry and Brandon. I know we have someone lined up for our next segment. So Sherry, do you want to introduce what's coming up?
Yes, we're going to be hearing from Rubadiri Victor, and I want to throw it to Ian because it's actually through Ian that we met Rubadiri. So Ian, would you like to introduce Rubadiri?
It's an honor and a challenge to introduce Rubadiri. I was lucky enough to meet him when we were both in UE. He was very young at the time, and his achievements as a mask maker, with the Kiskini Caravan, bringing Rapso into the 1990s, I suppose. As an artist, as a cultural activist, and as somebody who has really lived the life and gone who's really lived the life of being an artist and made a real impact in the world. I'm honored to have him here, and welcome, Ruder.
Welcome.
Hi guys, am I in? Am I there? Are you hearing me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, good stuff. Hi, Wikipedians, and hi diaspora, and hi world, and hi everyone else. Thank you for the privilege, guys, for bringing me here, to talk about this thing. Brandon, are you the one responsible for the name of the paper, that the salience of the multidimensionality?
Oh, yes. Let me just put it as a disclaimer. I know I put it there just because I think, and I just want to give a bit of a background. So in conversing some time ago with Rubadiri, I resonated quite a bit with what Rubadiri wanted to speak about. And I just in, thinking about and just reflecting on what he wanted to speak about, this was just what came. This isn't necessarily what he's going to talk about, but,
No, it is.
I really believe, yes. So, I really believe in all the Caribbean moving together and coming together and talking about the salience of our truth getting out there. So I just wanted to make it look pretty.
All right, well,
so go ahead,
yeah,
Rubadiri.
I'm sure it intrigued a lot of people when they're like, the what? So this is the thing. So let me start. I consider Trinidad and Tobago the infinite island, right? The island of multitudes. But it is also part of a region that inhabits that same space of infinity. So this is a chain of infinite islands. This is ground zero on planet Earth of global capitalism, the meeting of the civilizations. This region, the Caribbean region, is the ground zero of the creation of the modern world, right? It is the space where capitalism appeared in its basic essence, in its infinite essence, in its quintessence, of the extrapolation of human being as capital, of every iota of land space and atom in the air as capital, and the capitalization of every single thing in this hemisphere, the theft of an entire hemisphere from native peoples, the largest theft by white supremacist Europeans, but the greatest theft in human history, the theft of an entire hemisphere. So, and at the center of this are these islands where, by dint of the accidents of histories, where the African peoples, plus with the natives, and in some spaces with East Indians and that kind of stuff, comprise majorities. And because of that, the nature of resistance in these islands was different. And because of that, the nature of the types of societies that unfolded after emancipation was different than what persisted in the white majority spaces of North America, Canada, large parts of South America, and those kinds of things. So in a lot of these spaces, there was a contention of cultures which enabled the cultures of native peoples, African peoples, East Indian peoples, the other peoples and stuff, to contend and win space and create more humane societies than had existed across the New World, that exist in the New World, but also that almost existed in the Old World as well. I consider Trinidad and Tobago, the Caribbean, these infinite islands, but Trinidad and Tobago in particular is a space almost unprecedented in terms of the sheer concentration of uh, of of cultures, of ethnic cultures from all over the planet, existing in one space where all of them are allowed to run along the dominant fault lines of the society and participate in a particular way. And because of that, when you're looking at Trinidad and Tobago history, it's never an easy look. There literally is like a prison, a diamond prison, that every single facet of the diamond kind of gives you another kind of landscape and vista into the possibilities. So I just want to talk a little bit about, jump into this kind of phenomenal verb that is Trinidad and Tobago. And for anybody watching, my name is, as I say, there, Rubidiri Victor. You can get me at Rubidiri Victor at IG, at Facebook, at Twitter, and LinkedIn. Or you can check out my website at rubidiri.org, or the Artists Coalition with an S, .wordpress.com, or Facebook, New Adventures of Anansi and YBN Folklore Theatre. So we're talking about Trinidad and Tobago. This place right here, right? So this strange shaped island, and Tobago, its sister twin island. And the thing is, it's called Trinidad and Tobago because it was called La Trinity. Columbus in his third voyage, he had made a pledge when he had left on his discoveries that he would pledge one of the islands to the Father, Son, Holy Ghost, the Holy Trinity. And on his third voyage, even though he did not land himself on this island, when he saw the three peaks at Moruga in the south, I think he remembered his promise, and he named the space La Trinity, and it's further come down and anglicized and it's become Trinidad. But the Kalinago name, the native first, one of so Trinidad did not just pop up out of thin air when Columbus arrived. Trinidad actually has thousands of years of history before that as a native civilization. The Kalinago name, one of the names for Trinidad and Tobago, was Airi or Kairi. Some people say it just means the island. Other people say it means land of the hummingbirds. And we'll actually talk about Trinidad and Tobago and its the amount of bird species and the amount of hummingbirds, the historic amount of hummingbirds that are located here in the island. It was also called the Island of Jewels after the fact of all these flying hummingbirds that populated the space. It was also called Nani by the Warao peoples, and I believe that is a deity, right? And Trinidad actually was a space that native peoples used to come consecrate priests and those kinds of things. It had a number of sacred sites. The Naparima Hill, called San Fernando Hill in south of the island, kind of dominant thing in the landscape, is a godhead for the Warao peoples. Aripo and El Tucuch, the two highest peaks in the northern range, are also deities and sacred sites, and the Aripo River that runs through it is also sacred sites. So this was actually a festival, sacred space for a number of tribes. So I also want to just go back, we're going back further. So we don't want to start with Columbus, because the normal mistake that anytime we speak, we start our island's histories with either independence, right? Which is this is a recent toy, or we begin our histories with slavery, especially those with African peoples, when you have tens of thousands of years of ancestral history on the motherland and also in the Americas before slavery. But there also is the native history, which begins before people start with Columbus. But there's a native history that starts before that. But there also is a geological history of the phenomena of these islands. And actually, when people kind of bond with a space and a land space, it normally begins with them bonding with that kind of cosmic kind of beginnings of the space, right? So Trinidad and Tobago, most southerly island in the Caribbean, we're known for fossil fuels, for the oil and gas. But what does that point to? The fact that we have so much oil and gas means that we had a lot of dinosaurs. We had a lot of prehistoric organic flora and fauna and those kinds of things in this part of the world. So it means that Trinidad was a rich space in terms of that kind of prehistoric life. So that's why we have the oil and gas and stuff that we have. Right. So, some of the things that we know, Trinidad has the third highest GDP in the hemisphere. Apart from United States and Canada, it's recognized by the World Bank for its highest income and all those things. But the thing is that Trinidad was once connected to the South American mainland. So that is the geological kind of beginnings of Trinidad and Tobago. And actually, it is said that we may have been still attached up to only recently, up to just 1,500 years ago, we may still have been attached by a land bridge to and so that is a recent, it's been happening over time, over geological time, but the complete break, it was very, very, very recent. The three mountain ranges in Trinidad are actually continuations of the Andes and the Andean mountain ranges stretching through Venezuela. So those rugged hills of the northern range, El Salvador, Aripo, El Tucuch, the central range, all these are continuations of that, the Caroni plain, all these things are continuations of things that are on the South American mainland. So I think Trinidad's uniqueness kind of begins there, because it is part of the Caribbean, but it is ultimately part of South America, and it is a continental climate and continental South American continental tropical rainforest and all of those things. It's fundamentally different flora and fauna than what is found up the islands. And so it's this kind of strange kind of thing that is an island, but it is also part of this continental kind of landmass. So it has the kind of density of flora and fauna and those kinds of things that you would attribute to continental rainforests and the kind of phenomena of something like the Andean mountains. Tobago is different. Tobago was formed by faults thrusting up from the sea. So there's volcanic activity 90 million years ago. Thrusting up Tobago out of the sea. Like a lot of the other Caribbean islands, there's no live volcanic stuff in Tobago at the present moment. Tobago is also very mountainous. It's dominated by a main ridge. It's 29 kilometers long, and it contains the hemisphere's first wildlife reserve, the first protected forest on this part of the world was founded in Tobago. So Tobago contains, in the middle of Tobago, this massive forest reserve that contains all kinds of species, birds, wildlife, butterflies, and other fauna. So Trinidad and Tobago, it begins, our kind of specialist kind of begins there. There are 485 species of birds confirmed in Trinidad and Tobago. It is one of the richest spaces for bird watchers in the world because there are few places in the world that there's so much concentrated amount of bird species per square foot as in Trinidad. It contains dozens of species, 18 species of hummingbirds. It's called the land of the hummingbirds, one of the densest concentrations of hummingbirds in the world. The Pawi, Trinidad Pawi, which is like a massive turkey-like bird, is located in the foot of the Northern Range. It is only located in Trinidad and Tobago. It is considered an endangered species. It is only located here. And there are 765 species of butterflies in Trinidad and Tobago, 129 of them located in Tobago. So Trinidad and Tobago's infinity kind of begins with its biodiversity and this incredible kind of landscape that we happen to have in, and you can hear my chickens outside in my garden. Right, so I always say that we have to start the conversation at the beginning, and so that gives us a sense of Trinidad and Tobago as a geological space. Wikipedia actually has a lot of beautiful entries on these things. Some of them could be fleshed out a little bit more, but I think that they have. I'm sure I can see Ian's hand somewhere inside of there. In some of those entries. But and so after this, the important thing to note is that Trinidad has this has the oldest First Peoples or native populations in this part of the world, right? So the Banwari man fossil located in South Trinidad and Tobago has been carbon dated anywhere between 5,400 to 7,000 years old. The settlement is 7,000 years old. It is the oldest Native American Amerindian presence in this part of the world. And so that's the beginning, right? It didn't start with Columbus 500 years ago. And again, there's 7,000 years to put it in some kind of thing. The big dynasties of Egypt and stuff are 3000 BC and those kinds of things. This predates it by 2,000 years, right? This is a civilization that has existed here, the stone tools. That fossil was found with a needle point and a stone tool, right? So so this was, we're talking about about human clothing and that kind of stuff, the fashioning of sophisticated tools and all those different kinds of things, right? Most of the trails in Trinidad and the alignments of our main highways and stuff are actually from native walkways and pathways, starting with that same place where Columbus landed in Moruga, that goes all the way up straight to San Fernando by the Naparima Hills. That tract is the tract that's traced by the natives and stuff arriving from this American mainland through Moruga and coming up north. Now the thing is that we always talk about the Spanish and the Europeans and their sailing prowess, whatever. But the Native Americans of the Caribbean were traversing like people were hopping from island to island, like how we take taxis to go from town to buy a friend. They say, well, check here, like somebody into to Trinidad will say, we're not checking about heading to Cuba, be making a turn like to Cuba, and we will check in we'll check in a month or 2 months and stuff, and they will jump in their canoes and they would head up. I mean, they traverse the seas and as easily as that. Their understanding of astronomy and tides and the navigation and that kind of stuff, the sophistication, the simple but sophisticated way that their boats were constructed, all of those things led to them. So the thing is that when the Europeans arrived here in Trinidad and Tobago, they actually met a population of 40,000 natives. And we always have this thing about the Caribs and Arawaks. That's another myth that we have, that we all learn in our primary schools. I was from primary school to secondary school, you have to learn this. And the first thing you learn when you go into university, there's no such thing as Caribs and Arawaks. And it's like, the first thing you see in history class is like, okay, first thing, they have no such thing. So it's like, what? I just, for the first 19 years of my life, like 16 years of my life, you burned this into my head. Like that was like the first thing I had to learn. And here's the first thing in university, learning that is a European myth. Right? Like if they met somebody and they were violent to them, they were Caribs, and if they were peaceful to them, somebody else met those same people, they would be Arawaks. I mean, the truth is, they were two different language speakers that you could say that they're Arakan and Caribbean peoples and that kind of stuff. But the real truth is that there were a number of different tribes that were here, that were intermarrying and all kinds of different kinds of things that traded together, that all those kinds of things. One was not a set of cannibals and another set weren't all peaceful and docile. That all of these things are myths, right? So in Trinidad, there were a number of tribes: the Kalina, the Warao, the Kalipuna, the Nipoyo, the Taino, the Awaka, the Caribbean people, the Yao. There were a number of different tribes. 40,000 people. 40,000 people is a sizable portion in the 1400s, right? That is a huge population, right? That's comparable to many parts of Europe, massive conurbations and that kind of stuff that would outnumber a number of the large cities and stuff, So this is a massive conurbation of people. And as soon as Columbus and the Europeans arrived, the slaughter and the genocide began. And a massive depopulation of peoples. And in Trinidad, they were garrisoned into reservations, just like what would happen in North America. And Arima was, which now is considered like this, great Amerindian settlement, but it really was a reservation where the surviving tribes in the 17th century, after 2 centuries of slaughter, were kind of corralled, and those kinds of things, So a lot of the settlements in St. Joseph, Trinidad's first capital, was actually a massive settlement of native peoples, and they seized the land of the cacique Guangonare there and set up that in 1592, slaughtered the peoples there. In that same space in Arima, there was resistance from High Arima, the war chief of the Nipoyo at that time, who fought the Spanish and thing until eventually they fought them back and those kinds of things. But the thing is that the native peoples, they had civilization, and they also had dignity and they had resistance. The Spanish did not meet an easy ask in invading this space, and so we honor the native peoples, we honor the first peoples, and we have to start the conversation. We always must start our conversation when we're speaking about our civilization in the right place. And that's where it begins. The Spanish arrived. So we should also say that some of the legacy of the native peoples, there are over 200 place names that are still
Can I ask
native
you a
First Peoples
question?
names. Sure.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. You mentioned something about the Caribs, and I know that being born in Dominica, my grandmother is a Carib. So when you were saying that the Caribs, can you just describe that when you're talking about the Arawaks and the Caribs? And I also see that we're coming on the 2:30 mark, and I don't want to. I want to make sure that people have time to ask you questions as well. So I just want to mention that as well. But thank you. This has been amazing. I think everyone will agree. This has been an amazing. Thank you so much for the knowledge that you're sharing with us.
No problem.
And, yes.
So yeah.
Please,
the thing is
bring
that
your questions to the chat.
Sure, no problem. The thing is that the Carib and Arawakans are language groupings of peoples, right? And it doesn't really connote the amount of diversity within like just the phenotypes and the on those kinds of things. So it's not really an accurate this ethnic description of the peoples, right? So we should actually honor the peoples by calling them by what they originally called themselves, and begin there, rather than because there's a lot of confusion, because there are peoples who Spanish or other peoples will call Carib, or that others would call Arawak, simply because of whether they met them with violence or diplomatically. So there are a lot of European corruptions of what peoples are called. So the actual real names of the tribes should be our real markers into what they are. So we need to find what those original names were. In Trinidad, that is now happening, right? So we used to just have people, everybody was Carib, right? But that's not accurate, right? As I said, you heard the amount of tribes I called, right? Who are a mixture of all these different language groupings and all those different kinds of things. Everybody's not Carib, right? So the actual names are all those other things: Kalinago, Warao, Nepoyo. Yeah. Those are the ethnic things of the tribes. And so we have to start to reclaim
the name.
We have to start to reclaim that from our history. So any questions or?
Yeah, Ian, can you do you see any questions coming in from the community? I know that we have I saw one about the pandemic recently that I thought would be very interesting to talk about. Seeing that it's from Isaiah, and he's asking, seeing that we're in a pandemic, any info on how foreign illnesses brought by the Europeans affected Amerindians? So any question, he's asking a question about foreign illnesses brought by Europeans affecting the Amerindians.
I can't speak with authority on it. I know just from I remember things like smallpox, syphilis. Those are the kinds of things that we remember just from my old history days and those kinds of things. But we're pretty sure that the Europeans brought a set of diseases. They did that right across the hemisphere. That also helped the decimation of peoples. And because there was so much rape, a lot of the venereal diseases and those kinds of things, which there was just no kind of resistance or any kind of treatment for, any kind of thing like that. Those kinds of things really wiped out a lot of native peoples and those kinds of things. So there were a lot of there was a lot of debauchery, there was a lot of that, and there was a lot of diseases. But that actually might be a really good entry. Somebody could write on, because I know it's documented very well for in North America, in and other spaces. I don't know how well that kind of epidemiology is done here for First Peoples in our part of the world. So I don't know. I do you know anything about it, Ian?
Some. There's probably mostly there's a lot for the Greater Antilles, where the Spanish did the same, bring smallpox and so on, that they did in North America. The waves of epidemics, so the decimation of the native populations in Tobago and the Lesser Antilles, a lot of that was slave raids, and a lot of that, and to Trinidad too. So slave raids to work in the Margarita pearl fisheries, where sure disease killed them if the diving didn't.
Right.
But also, I mean, in Trinidad, you can see it started with 40,000, maybe more. I sometimes think that even that's an underestimate. To
I'm pretty sure.
By the 1700s, and a lot of that was disease, and Tobago was almost completely depopulated.
Yeah. We lost our last pure blood native person in the late 90s. So there are no more pure blood natives in Trinidad and Tobago. There are people like me who are 1/8 and that kind of stuff for half or a quarter, but that's that's the reality of the thing. And like there are places like Cuba and stuff where 500,000 people will be wiped out in like 2 decades or 3 decades, and like ridiculous kinds of numbers like that. So I just populating the time with some of the things that kind of makes Trinidad what it is. One of the most important things that happens in Trinidad happens in 1783 with the cedula of population. And that's one of the things that makes Trinidad and Tobago, that the beginning of Trinidad and Tobago's kind of multi-ethnicity and kind of, but multi-ethnicity even with the Europeans, and also with the way that the land space is set up. So pre-1783, the Spanish are kind of lazy kind of colonizers, because they're all looking for El Dorado. They're not really concentrated as a site, as a space of governance. And so to populate this space, and the fact that there's also Toussaint and them are running riot in Haiti. And so all the French colonies are panicking and that kind of stuff. So the cellulars open up for refugees and all these kinds of things. And what happens in 1783 is that any white person coming with gets X amount of land, and for every slave you get a half acre or an acre and that kind of stuff. Any free colored gets a certain amount of land and those kinds of things. And so the whole of Trinidad in no time at all is settled from being a kind of very virgin slave population with native peoples into a full-fledged late African slave plantation space. And it happens very, 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 very quickly. So that the colony had 1,000 people in 1773. That's to tell you from the 40,000 of native inhabitants, 1,000 including Europeans in 1773. That to 18,627 by 1797. And that would, so we'd have almost 20,000 people by the end of that century. And it, in no time at all, sugar mills, sugar, everything, the full, like slavery is imported it is like when you talk about industrialization by invitation. This is the first kind of industrialization by invitation from virgin land and whatever, that kind of stuff. The first sugar was erected in 1787. By 1799, 2,700 tons of sugar. And by 1808, there are 272 sugar mills, 257 animal drawn, producing 9,500 tons of sugar. Within like a decade, this entire infrastructure of slavery and plantation slavery imported and dropped onto the island, and is working and is a growing concern. Inside of that is some of the magic that happens, because Calypso is born in that period. Calypso is born in the caves at the top of Covine in Diego Martin by the same man who brings in the first sugar mill, Burgerat, who is called the devil by many of his fellow planters and his slaves at the time, right? So he has his plantation, his big house is on top of a series of caves that enables him to, on top of the highest hills in Diego Martin, which enables him to get to all points of the island, of the northern part of the island, in secret, right? And also to run contraband through one of the beaches that is much miles and miles and miles away. He has a favorite slave called Grosjean, who sings calypsos on his enemy planters and those kinds of things. And Grosjean is his weapon in terms of the psychological destruction of his enemies. And so Grosjean, of course, Grosjean and them on the plantation and privately are singing on Burgerat and are singing on everybody else, right? But so the form is the first genius of the form, because it's a form, obviously, was a folk form that has existed, that is passed on, the griot tradition from Africa and those kind of stuff. But the genius of Grosjean is that he had distilled it into this potent form, with certain kinds of cadence and certain kinds of meter and certain kinds of rhyme schemes and all those different kinds of things, rhythms, drum rhythms, those kinds of things. And the amazing thing is that the first 3 recorded calypsonians of all time all appear in that cave, in Burgerat's cave. So there's Grosjean, then Soso or Sonson, and then Papa Couchon, who also happens to be they say is a champion Obia man, right? He's supposed to be a champion magician of African arts and occult arts of the first order. He's supposed to be a shape changer who knows how to talk to animals, who is able to divine what people are thinking, and divine where people have hidden things. So he is another weapon that the plantation has, because he's able to find where people hide riches, who have hidden stuff and those things by looking at them, right? So these are the 3 first calypsonians.
I'm so glad you mentioned calypso music, because and
it's an amazing
to
story.
know the history. I think it's right? Wonderful that you mentioned calypso music, because the history of music in the Caribbean and how they come to be, and that story that you just told is emblematic of the rich traditions that are in the Caribbean. But before we move on to talking to our next segment, which is going to be focusing on the music of the Caribbean, I just want to give a big thank you to Rupadieri Victor for being our tremendous guest for the first ever WikiCari Festival. And I want to make sure everyone just gives him a round of applause. We got to give you a round of applause. Thank you so much for coming. It was fascinating.
Thanks a lot, guys. I mean, there was so much more to talk about. There was sports heroes and arts heroes, and there were all kinds of things. I mean, there's an infinity of things: the cuisine, the the
Yes.
all the music, so everything. There's a lot of stuff to get onto. But the thing is, I had to give our origins of. I think we need to start properly, and I could not begin with geological time, and also to begin as the divine gift of landscape. Walcott would tell us, and also with our native peoples, who are getting short shrift most of the time by us, and so yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
But I leave it in a good
Right
place.
now, yeah, you started us off well. We're like a rocket ship right now, and we really appreciate you setting the stage for us. So right now we're going to hear from, we're going to talk a little bit about music in the Caribbean. And let's start with one of the members of Wikimedians of the Caribbean, Yvonne Gonzalez, who also leads another group called Noisir Wikipedia, which hopes to improve representation of Wikipedia of people of African descent. She's based in Europe, but she's also a Caribbean, Cuban, born and bred. And let's just hear a little bit from Yvonne, who I believe also is a singer as well.
Hola, buenas tardes. Me llamo Ivonne González. Soy la fundadora y creadora de los proyectos Noisir Wikipedia y Ennegreciendo Wikipedia en nuestra enciclopedia en línea. Son proyectos que están en francés y en español. Y es un placer enorme poder enviarles este mensaje desde aquí, desde Ginebra, Suiza, y que se reúna, que haya un meeting de los wikimedianos del Caribe que se produzca. Yo estoy muy contenta, aunque no pueda participar en las próximas fechas por compromisos profesionales, pero estoy muy contenta de los wikimedianos, que los wikimedianos del Caribe se reúnan, porque nuestra cultura, nuestra región está muy poco representada dentro de la Wikipedia y nuestros saberes son múltiples y muy ricos. Noisir Wikipedia, Ennegreciendo Wikipedia, no solamente incorpora a la Wikipedia contenido sobre el Caribe y la afrodescendencia, sino que también quiere hacer de los artículos unos artículos que tengan una redacción desprovista de toda expresión racista, machista y colonial hacia nuestra cultura afrodescendiente y hacia las culturas del Caribe. Espero que tengan una hermosa reunión, un hermoso meeting, y me despido de ustedes con un canto alegua, que es el Señor, el Oricha, que abre y cierra los caminos. Ibarago moyuba, Ibarago ago moyuba, Omo de conicos Ibarago ago moyuba, elewa chulona. Gracias a todos por su atención.
Gracias. Gracias, Yvonne. That was wonderful. And she spoke to us about her project that's working hard. We've been connected through AfroCrowd, which does something similar. We're based in the United States. We have partners in different parts of the world. And Yvonne has been working hard to ensure that people of African descent are represented on Wikipedia, as well as women. And we're very excited that she's a part of Wikimedians of the Caribbean, because, representation is also important to us as well. And it was wonderful to hear Yvonne sing, because Yvonne is actually a very accomplished singer. And so for her to give us that little tidbit was really special. So thank you so much, Yvonne. Gracias, Yvonne, et merci, Yvonne, aussi, because she also speaks very fluent French. And in the wings, we do have another guest who I believe is live. and who's joining us from Haiti. By the way, Sakpase Haiti, I see our Haiti people in the comment section. We've seen a few of you give a shout out and say that you're following us. So merci, merci. Quoi de neuf, Sakpase. And so do we still have Renzi in the wings, or did he step away?
I think he stepped away just a bit. But I think yeah, but I think in the meantime, we could still, while working on that, we could still, push on.
Okay, great. So in this segment, so you heard a little bit of Cuban music as interpreted by Yvonne. And so we are, and during this segment, we're going to be talking a little bit about Caribbean music. And we played some to start off with. Is it possible for us to play that again? I know I'm asking a lot here, but it would be great to hear some music during this segment as well. But right now, what we have pulled up is a list of Caribbean music genres that are available on Wikipedia. So let's just rewind. For anyone who is new to the community, to Wikipedia, or just the concept of Wikipedia in general, or the community that's behind it, what you're seeing in front of you is created by Wikipedians. Brandon, would you be able to just tell us a little bit about the process of how people add information like we're seeing in front of us to Wikipedia?
Absolutely. I think that ties in quite beautifully with a question that came in a bit earlier. So the process, just to be pretty quick here, is actually quite simple. If I may, I will share my screen here really quickly so I could guide through the process here. So you should be seeing my screen here. So quite quickly here, I think the most important part of, starting the process is, of course, creating an account. So of course here, it's pretty straightforward. It follows, in the same order that you would creating an email address or anything, any sort of internet, account that you make. So of course you start with your username, you start with your password, and then you go through and proceed through there. Now, what's important about this, and I'm just going to go back here. This page in particular does not have restrictions in terms of, registered users being only able to edit here. So I'm just going to proceed here, and I'm just going to go into edit. And the reason why I'm going in here, and you can see a banner here to say that, just switch to visual here. So I think it's most important to, sort of give some perspective as to what the process really entails, because in having a call to action like one of which we have, it's also important to also understand what the tools we're going to be working with includes. So here, of course, you can see, quite a bit of information, quite a bit of, knowledge disseminated here. But the most important thing is the information here, among many other things, is information that would have had to have come from an empirical source. So usually what I recommend is for people to start with, some research, whether that be, for instance, you have a repository on, say, like, your school library, or you're in academia and you have access to, those kinds of resources. That is where I most definitely recommend that you start from. It's most important because you need to have your arsenal, if you will, of information at your disposal. And this information should also be that which the wider internet, the wider, community can also access. Not just because, there's going to be, second checks from, bots or actual editors, but because this information, when put on the web, is also very important to have that accessible to people who want to, as Wikipedia is a first step in that, search for knowledge rather. You want to clearly point to that, open repository and that open resource for people to go and have a deep dive. So as you can see here, quite quickly, this is a source. I'm not sure if I can see it right here. I'm just going to scroll down into the citations here. Pardon me. So in the citations here, you could see quite quickly here where they are pulling from. And a lot of this information, whilst of course very important, a lot of this information ideally would have been information that could be openly accessed. And that open accessibility, again, ties into the core objective of our outreach. It's, again, and I always stress this, it is super important to open the borders to information. In the Caribbean in particular, and I'm going to say this being, a national of the Caribbean, I realize that we tend to very often gatekeep information. And I think this is something that we can all sort of understand, in the context of, you wanting to find some information about a specific issue, and then you hit up into a paywall, or you hit up into, this information only being accessible through, going into a physical location, which is wholly impossible here right now in the midst of COVID-19. And to have all these encumbrances, whilst also, trying to get this information out into the wider world and working on something that is quite time sensitive, is wholly impossible. And it makes the task even more difficult. And so there are different parts of the experience that we have to address. This here, for instance, we can see that there is an ISBN code that's in, that has been sourced here. And there are various other parts of information that we can see here in the notes as well, where of course we have open access to these pieces of information, which is again really important. But this is an exception rather than the rule, unfortunately. And we have many other instances where there are articles relating to the Caribbean that do not have this much granularity. And even this article in and of itself isn't as granular as we would have hoped. And Ian would have touched on that a bit briefly earlier in the call about, the fact that there are different grades of Wikipedia articles that exist. So to get these bits of or vignettes, as I like to call them, of information about the Caribbean to A grade, we have to put the work in. And so that work starts with you getting your sources, getting onto Wikipedia, finding that pseudonym, getting on board, and then starting, the process of contributing, whether it's by making small corrections in spelling or in, certain syntax errors, and then building, incrementally and getting to that point where you're now fully able to contribute in a fulsome manner. And I think that that's perhaps the best way that we can really get the, the wheels of knowledge going.
Thank you so much, Brendan. That was fantastic. And for anyone out there who wants to become a Wikipedian today, what you can send us a message in the chat, or you can go directly to our Wikipedia page, where you'll see some places where you can get some information as we go along throughout the day. But it's a good time right now to consider it, because you've got a lot of people who are willing to help you out, even just in the comments themselves. And the first step really is to get an account. But we were about to talk about some of the music of the Caribbean. Can we go back to that page with the list of the different genres? What's your favorite type of Caribbean music? Who is your favorite artist? What do you think of, for those of you who are not in the Caribbean but are coming to us from in the diaspora, or are not Caribbean descended but fans of the Caribbean? What do you think of when you think of Caribbean music? And one thing I love about Caribbean music is that there's such a large range to choose from. Just in Dominica alone, where I was born, you've got so many different awesome kinds of music. And did you know that you can go to Wikipedia right now and look at the music from each island? So if you'll scroll down to the bottom of the page, and the page we're looking at, Brandon, could you let them know what the page is and how you got there?
Sure. So Actually, I think that's so this is on Andrew. Andrew's the one who's navigating right now. But I think the best way to find it would
Gotcha.
actually be through just, for instance, if you scroll to the very top, just typing in list of Caribbean music genres, that's the best way to start your search. And it brings you right there, as you can see, and that carries you right into the page that we're on right now.
And also another good way to look is, for those of you who aren't as familiar with Wikipedia, is to go through Google. And that's another good way. Usually Wikipedia articles are among the top, so you'll see it there. And on this page, if you go, right now we're in English Wikipedia, so we go to en.wikipedia.org. And as Brendan just showed you, in the top right corner, there's an option to search. And that's how you'd find this list. But you can try out any kind of word combination. You can say West Indian music. You can try saying the genre itself, like we talked about calypso. Many of you growing up may have heard of reggae, which is a very famous Caribbean music. Let's go to the bottom of the page of the Caribbean list of Caribbean music genres, and you can go by like we were talking about. You can go by country. So I'm gonna randomly pull up. Let's go to the Dominican Republic, and we've got merengue, we've got yuca, we've got dembow. I know some of y'all are coming in from the Dominican Republic, and I love Dominican music. I love dancing to bachata, for example. How about you guys? What's your favorite kind of Caribbean music that maybe people haven't heard of as much? How about you, Ian?
Oh, go ahead.
It's not something that people haven't heard of, but I think my favorite musician is David Rudder, just for the breadth of history and the complexity and the
you gotta say that for the people in the back, because I don't even think I heard what you said.
David Rudder. David Rudder.
David Rudder. Okay, let's pull him up on Wiki. Oh, we got the music. It came in. Awesome.
There's no one who. There are few modern Palestinians and modern like David Broad who have that level of history and the art form in its pure, in its real form, and also is so ready to recognize where he's coming from and where it's coming from. And another, there's another.
Okay,
sorry.
Let's just go with it. It's time to vibe again.
Also, there's a band called Shadwell. Everybody here might have heard of Shadwell.
At some point, hopefully, the music will quiet down. Until then, it's time to jump up.
I'm a bad Caribbean national. To be very honest, I very often find myself all over the place. And also as a Jamaican, I also think too that mostly Jamaica is quite overexposed. And I think most Jamaicans can agree that Jamaican music has become quite overexposed in the sense of most of our art forms are pretty popular. Especially now, there's a lot of dance hall, pop, dance hall, R&B, dance hall, rap infusions happening. I mean, just yesterday, Kanye West put out an image of him in studio with Buju Banton, which might be a big deal for, many other, people, but I mean, in Jamaica, it's just like, okay, well, Kanye West is here. He's been here before. He's been, countless times before, but I think Jamaican music, Trinidadian music of the Caribbean in particular plays such a key role in how we understand not just the Caribbean, but world history. And when I say that, it's not because I'm very into self-aggrandizement, but because Caribbean music has influenced various different cultures around the world. It would be remiss of me to not mention the fact that, music in the UK, for instance, is greatly influenced by artistry that was indigenized in the Caribbean. The Trinidadian diaspora, the Jamaican diaspora, the Bajan, the Dominican, all the diasporas that would have come from the Caribbean and would have fed into these global North countries have influenced immensely, might I add, the way in which those art forms that are now there have developed. The same goes for even when you look at what happens with, that infusion of people from the French Antilles, for instance, that go to, as the French call l'hexagone. You see there, the grit and the power of the stories that are told in music that comes from, certain artists in France and wider France too, is really influenced by very huge steepings and of Caribbean music. So that's why I would veer into saying that Caribbean music is as important as it is. But Rubidiri also has something to pitch in here. So go ahead, Rubidiri. Oh, unmute your mic.
You have to unmute Rubidiri. Well,
Yes.
while he does that, I want to mention Bouillon. I want to mention Exile One. I want to mention Cadence. And here is that Rubidiri? Have you unmuted? Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, yeah. I want to underline bold and all caps what Brandon just said. In my reading of the 20th century, I say the 20th century is a period of golden ages of African culture across the planet. But in the New World, located mostly in the New World, they're all music-led cultural golden ages that changed the entire living vibrations and civic ordinances and everything of planet Earth. So, in America, there's the revolutions of blues, jazz, pop, rock, R&B, disco, hip hop, those things. In Trinidad, there's pan, mass, calypso, and the carnivals, and then soca. In Jamaica, there's reggae and dancehall, ska, reggae, dancehall. There's samba. In Haiti, there's the cha-cha-cha, and all the Latin things that change the vibrations of their diasporas and stuff. And there are these things impacting even West Africa. So calypso goes back and West Africa remembers its ancestral self and high life and all these things are born and stuff on the West Coast and those kinds of things. All these things are African golden ages, and a lot of them are Caribbean. They're the engine and the heartbeat, even of hip hop and all of these things, and that kind of stuff. The engine and heartbeat in Brooklyn and the Bronx and those kinds of things. The fathers and mothers of a lot of the hip hop artists and stuff are Caribbean peoples and that kind of stuff. Brooklyn is a colony of the Caribbean,
Victorious.
Well, not the gentrified Brooklyn that exists now, but the old Brooklyn was a colony,
old school.
a reverse colony, There are 300 Trinidad style carnivals on planet Earth, in the two largest street festivals in the Western world are Trinidad style carnivals. At their height, 4 million people on the streets of Brooklyn and London, where if two Black people get together, it's cause for police action. We have millions and they can't do anything about it, and that wasn't no public sector or private sector did that. It was people. It was, the power of people and the power of music and the power of the culture. And so the thing is the impact, and we are African people, and especially the things that Caribbean peoples remember, because remember I said that we are the place where the majority Black populations existed post-emancipation. So a fundamentally different types of societies evolved out of that post-colonial experiments than existed anywhere else in the New World, that are more humane, that have been more inclusive, that have been more innovative, and have been spaces and sites of civic and human innovation that hasn't been happening anywhere else on the planet. And we have been the space and the source of that invention. And so we have to start to see ourselves as those technicians, and the music as being the music has been the lab. The music has been the place where those things happen, and all that long list of culture heroes that we have coming down in the music, an amazing set of liberation leaders and inventors and thinkers and that kind of stuff that have basically taken their part in the forefront of humanizing planet Earth. The lived democracy of the planet is very much an African invention, but it is very much a Caribbean African invention, beginning with Toussaint, Bookman, Toussaint, Dessalines, and all the way through the musicians and the culture leaders of this space, allied with all those other people who carry the germs and things, whether it be a Kwame Ture and a Marcus Garvey, and all those others who contain all this information, in their utterances.
Thank you
I
so
agree.
much. And also, oh, go ahead, Brandon. Yeah. I also wanted to mention, before we continue, I don't want to cut you off. You mentioned the all of humanity in the earth, and that's a great segue into our next section, which the day is just swimming by. We're going to be talking about the environment and botany soon. But before we close this portion on music, I know, Brendan, you had something you wanted to mention, and also I wanted to talk about something that was in the chat. And someone mentioned that they've already started an article. Actually, Jethro, but I want to mention you in our section on food, because that's coming soon. And it would be great to give you a shout out then about your article that you started doing. Yes. And also, Zipporah was telling Ian, she likes your selection of music. You're on point. And then, of course, we did talk about hip hop. And my family, when we left Dominica to come to the United States when I was younger, we came to the Bronx. And the Bronx is where a lot of Caribbean immigrants in the diaspora in the United States are doing, at least the time my family came in, passed through. And the Bronx, Brooklyn, and New York still has a strong Caribbean heritage, and hip hop was part of that. So for anyone interested, it'd be interesting to study hip hop and its roots and how the story of immigrants fits into that from the Caribbean. And someone put in ska. Ska, is another import-export that the world has really come to love. I don't think we can exit this time without talking about Bob Marley, about Peter Tosh, about more recent artists as well who've just been great ambassadors of the Caribbean to the world. We can't forget the Fugees, I mean, there's just so much, and we could go on forever about music. But Brandon, what would you mention? What were you had something that you wanted to say? Okay. I wish we had the music again, because I was starting to really get into it when we were there. I wish we had I could wave my flag. I brought my colors, but I could wave my flag. That's one of the reasons we're here, is because we're missing that carnival music. But anyway, so I think that does that segue is great into our next portion, which is going to be led by Ian, who is our expert here on all things Caribbean botany, and would love to hear more about the environment, which has become, you know, in our times where there's so much going on in the world, even right now as we speak. In the past weeks, there's been hurricanes that have been affecting the Caribbean area. I know in the past few years, we've had hurricanes like Maria, for example, that hit, you know, that hit the Caribbean pretty hard, including Dominica, Puerto Rico, and so many other places. So I think it's definitely, we think it's definitely really important to talk about the island in terms of the environment as well. So please take it away, Ian.
So I think before I talk about that, I need to acknowledge some people. So I learned about plants from some really important people who really shaped my life. I need to talk about Molly Gaskin, who introduced me to native plants and to medicinal plants. I need to talk about Borai Kalu, who used to work at the herbarium in UWI, who was a national treasure in terms of knowledge of Trinidadian plants that never really got the recognition that the rest of the world, although he was frequently mentioned and thanked in the scientific literature. Julian Duncan, professor of botany, who a native of St. Lucia, was at UWI. He was a huge influence in teaching me about plants, and Winston Johnson also at the herbarium in Trinidad. I want to thank these people for teaching me that there was a natural world in Trinidad and a real richness, because not just Trinidad, but the Caribbean is where the science of botany and taxonomy really starts. It's some of the earliest, the age of exploration, when the Europeans started traveling around the world and collecting plants from different places and so on. That's really a big part of what prompted Linnaeus to establish taxonomy. The early researchers and naturalists went to Barbados, went to Jamaica. Sir Hans Sloane was one of the early plant collectors. And right throughout our history, we've been the place where the primarily Europeans came, collected, and described our history, described our natural history. Unfortunately, it was a colonial enterprise, but we even give that up and think that we're insignificant in the world, but we're really where the world learned about plant diversity, about and where everything started, not just plants but animals. The Caribbean is considered a biodiversity hotspot. A lot of people don't realize how rich it is, how many unique species of plants and animals there are in the Caribbean. The Caribbean is also a hotspot of extinction. There have been more mammalian extinctions in the Caribbean than anywhere else in the world over the last 500 years. There have been bird extinctions. There have been, even going back a little further, I've always loved ground sloths. The last ground sloths in the world were probably in Cuba and Puerto Rico. They survived there thousands of years longer than on the mainland. But when the world sees the Caribbean nature, they see the beach, maybe the reefs, maybe the rainforests. They miss, and we ignore the most important ecosystem in the Caribbean on land, which is the dry forests. We think of them as bush, as unimportant, thorny shrubs and so on. But as a friend of mine called them, they're the proletariat of the Caribbean, of natural ecosystems, because they've been were destroyed sooner, they were destroyed more completely, and that's where all of the Lesser Antilles, the sugar plantations were. That's where, even in Trinidad, the rich sugar plantations of the Naparimas were on dry or drier forests. And there's so much there. We also tend to think of our environment in a sort of binary way. Either there's the developed land where all the native vegetation is gone, or there's the forest. And a lot of that is a colonial enterprise. The British marked off the forest reserves and kicked out the people and said, this is nature, and the people are destroying nature by squatting and by burning the forests and so on. They did it throughout the world. And that separated people from nature. So you go to, you go to the Caribbean today, you have a forest reserve and then you complain about squatters encroaching on it. But it was once the land where people lived. It was our primeval forests were shaped by the original inhabitants. I'm of the opinion that the Mora forests in southeastern Trinidad, which are a unique type of forest, 90% of the trees are just one species, and they're some of the tallest trees in Trinidad. I believe that these are old Amerindian gardens, and that's what shaped them. I can't prove it, but that's my suspicion. Another thing that we think about with food and plants is we don't realize that we're eating the same thing that people have eaten in the Caribbean for 5,000 years. We think about all the things that were brought in. But if you look at people have looked at the Banwari site and the St. John site in Trinidad, oldest archaeological sites in the Caribbean, and the people were eating. They were eating corn and peppers and sweet potato and yellow sapote, which I think is a sapodilla. Our food has not changed nearly as much as we think. Even when we add the level of Indian cooking, it's still a lot of indigenous food in there. And then we think, but on top of that, we do have the things we've imported. We love our breadfruit, which came from the South Pacific.
Breadfruit, yes.
We reading this book that I'm loving on Barbadian food. See, Pigtails and Breadfruit. It's
What's it
called Pigtails and Breadfruit. And
nice.
It is Austin Clarke's memoir of old Barbadian food. And the land, as Rubineri said, the geology shaped the land. The Caribbean is a continent scattered over water. You go to a different island, and maybe things look different at first, but you realize the plants are the same. You recognize the plants, you recognize the commonalities there. Then you talk to the people and you realize even if they speak a different language, they still speak the same. They're still the same. Sorry.
I have a real quick question on that. I know that Wikidata is being used more by, I think people know Wikipedia, but they're not as familiar with Wikidata and how powerful it can be to ensure that information like what you're talking about has a connection to the statistical data that's associated with it. For example, tags onto information that's on there about the flora, the fauna, even the foods of the Caribbean. So can you mention a little bit concerning that and how people can participate there?
Sure. So Wikidata is a sister project. In order to sign up, you can use the same account that you created for Wikipedia. You can go over to Wikidata. Wikipedia seeks to be all the sort of the sum total of human knowledge. Well, Wikidata is much more than that. So you can see there are almost 90 million data items versus, what are we, 6 point something million articles on Wikipedia. The amount of information on Wikidata is immense, and it could be orders of magnitude bigger. We're still just getting started on Wikidata. The information, Wikipedia articles are about putting things in context. Wikidata has the basics there. So you go through the articles, through the entries, and it's just facts. And the ability of facts to connect to different facts is what makes the database so incredibly rich. And the ability to query that and draw conclusions that mightn't be evident if you didn't have all those pieces together. Ask questions of the data that nobody has ever asked before. It's an incredible resource, but it depends on having people build it. And there is so much to build in the Caribbean. There's a project, Every Politician, which tries to link together all the politicians. A few weeks, maybe a few months ago now, I realized that we don't even have a full list of attorneys general of Trinidad and Tobago. And then I got as far as adding George Richards and realized that while I'm almost certain he's Max Richards' father, I can't find a source to support that. There is so much, and when you talk about our food and our plants and all of that, there's a lot to be added in terms of distributions, in terms of where things are, and in terms of what things are, because it's easy with people to say born, nationality, if you can find a source, all these facts of who they are. But when you're trying to express more complicated concepts, it's really hard to break something down into a series of facts. What is Calypso? What is Carnival? How do you make that into facts? It's something that
what is breadfruit? Yeah.
We need people who understand meaning and who can extract meaning and add it in there so that it can be queried, because I'm good with more concrete things, but ask me to extract something that's more nebulous and I get lost.
So we you alluded to it earlier, but we, from the rich bounty that the Caribbean provides, just from being diverse tropical islands, there's also diverse kinds of foods that can be found in the Caribbean. We've got some exports that a lot of people have heard of, but we put it to people for today's festival to kind of talk a little bit about the foods of the Caribbean as well. And how can somebody who is, during the event, we had somebody, I think it was Jethro, was it earlier, who mentioned that they started an article on, let me see if I can find it.
Pacro water.
What's that?
Pacro water.
Yes. Who started an article even while we were doing this. We were talking about about Tobagoan cuisine. So Pacro water, which, and also I think someone else also mentioned that they were looking for more information in that as well. What's your personal favorite meal? Caribbean meal, Ian?
Well, it's my
Or
grandmother.
your go-to?
My favorite, it's not my go-to. My favorite is my grandmother's curry goat and dalpuri.
Hey!
I haven't eaten, I quit eating meat in the late 90s, so it's been a long time since I've eaten curry goat. But it's, you know, there's your grandmother's cooking is
Yes,
your heart.
comfort food. How about you, Brendan? What's your favorite food?
Let me jump in. So my favorite food. So I'm kind of in that same sort of quandary as is Ian, because I recently actually made the switch over to being vegetarian. So very often I don't get the chance to have that meal. But when I do, or when I did, there's two things. It might sound quite cliche, but it is what it is. I love my ackee and saltfish. It's perhaps the only thing that brings delight to me.
I love your ackee and saltfish too. Whenever
It,
I go to Jamaican, yeah.
it's one of those things, like,
Oh,
it's
that's
a
so
salve for any wound. You have a bad day, just have
yes.
some ackee and saltfish. Like, it's just the best thing, and it's also quite friendly for me in the sense of, it's not as, of an indulgence or a sin, if you will. Relates to vegetarianism. But another one that I also love quite a bit, and unfortunately can't partake of anymore, is two things. One, curried goat, or curry mutton as we call it. Um, Love
Mm.
it. Like, absolutely love it. Like, I can't find anything wrong about it. It's just me. And also, another one of my favorites is also jerk chicken. I mean, I can't go wrong with jerk chicken. Personally, I have my set restaurant. I only take jerk chicken from one specific restaurant, that being Scotchy's, which is like a chain of jerk joints, if you will. I think they have one here in Montego Bay, and there's another one in Ocho Rios. There was one in Kingston. However, it's no longer there. But whenever you're in and around the area of Scotchy's, you are compelled to go to Scotchy's just because. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, those are my go-to meals. I also have, like, really, like, the snacks that I love are also around. You can find them around the Caribbean. Um, we have Jamaicans who are watching. I love my Miss Birdie Biscuits, which are like, I have them right in front of me, but I can't go for them right now. Which are like small, like, crackers that you can use, like, you could eat with, I don't know, hummus. I have them with hummus with red peppers. And just the same with other snacks that come from Trinidad and Tobago, which is very important in the Caribbean in particular. Trinidad and Tobago is a very huge part, especially in the English-speaking part of the Caribbean. Their snacks find their way across the Caribbean. So stuff like cheesies, Bigfoot, anything.
Crick.
Cricks. Oh my God, cricks. Even for instance, Barbados as well. Wibisco, which stands for West Indian Biscuit Company, which has a very long history of being in that business for a really long time. These are hallmarks of Caribbean cuisine. And I think just the same applies for even Puerto Rico, and Cuba and Haiti. These are things that especially because of, and going back to our historical context, because our historical context has not allowed us to be as interconnected as we'd have liked to have been. There is still a lot of segmentation in that regard, as it relates to how we relate culturally in terms of food. And very often, unfortunately, the only way in which we actually learn about each other's cuisine is through, being in global population centers like in New York, like a London, a Paris, and all these different places. It's unfortunate, but again, part of the mission of which a group like Wikimedians of the Caribbean, to help connect those various dots, those various parts of culture and food and diversity into one, and putting that out there and making that openly accessible to everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Um, Can I just see from the comments to Ian, Susan asked about the herbarium of Trinidad. And I think it's been answered, but she asked if there is an article about it on Wikipedia. And just in case anyone else was wondering, there isn't an article yet, but it's on the list. That's right, Ian?
One day. It's always a challenge.
One day, yeah. The day might be soon now. And I would be remiss if we didn't mention, since we were talking about food and you know, botany and the fruits, the vegetables, the plants that are available in the Caribbean, they're not really available on WikiCommons, which is where a lot of the images that you would find on Wikipedia are from. One way to check that out is either to go to Wikipedia and look up cuisine of the Caribbean or plants of the Caribbean. Let's go to cuisine of the Caribbean. I think it'd be interesting to see that. There's a list there, and it's by country, and a lot of the pages don't have images. And one thing that we can do is we can work when you load an image or you go to a Wikidata entry, think of the food of the Caribbean as well, because it's something that we can, even on this call, we can easily add to. The next time you're eating some Caribbean food, oh, great, thank you for pulling it up. Andrew, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you'll see that there is a listing, right? And if you open it up to see the wider listing, I believe that one has it by country, if I'm not mistaken. But anyway, so if you look up cuisine of the Caribbean, and you happen to love Caribbean food, if you're in the Caribbean, you know, next time you're eating, think about taking a picture of your food. People are always saying too many people these days with social media take pictures of their food. Well, in the Wiki community, we don't have enough people doing that, you know? So I want to know what a bus-up shot looks like. I want to be able to go to Wikipedia and find a picture of it. So next time you're eating a bus-up shot, or next time you're eating
a good picture.
Uh-huh.
Not
a good
picture,
yeah. Not one that, you know, I think right now what we have on there is great, but there's not that much. And also I think because it's such a diverse environment when it comes to food and culture and music and everything, the more we can add to it, the better the picture is of the Caribbean islands in general. So yeah, take a picture of your food and then go to Wikimedia Commons, and we're going to put the link in the chat section so that you can find it, Wikimedia Commons, if you haven't seen it before. And you can even Google it, just Google Wikimedia Commons, or you can go to the website, which is commons.wikimedia.org, I believe. And on there, you will be headed to the main page, where there'll be a wizard, you know, an editing wizard that allows you to upload images to Wikipedia. So as long as you have an account, which Brandon showed you earlier, you can surf between these different sites on the Wikiverse, and it's your passport to not just Wikipedia, but Wikimedia Commons to Wikidata. So it's really important for you to get your account. And once you do, oh, by the way, and avoid using your actual name, use a pseudonym for your privacy. But once you get that account, you can go to places like Wikimedia Commons and add images. So that's something you can do today out of this. So next up, we have in the program, we are going to be talking about a little bit about the cultural diversity of the Caribbean. And earlier we were going to have as our guest Renzi from Haiti. He's actually one of the lead organizers of Wikimedians in Haiti. Hopefully we'll have him still by the end of the show today. But we have a quick clip from Alice Backer, who actually is the founder of AfroCrowd, which I'm not the executive director, but Alice has been a very prolific Wikipedian for years, and she's also a Caribbean national, born in Haiti. And I believe she left us a message in Haitian Creole, if I'm not mistaken. So can we play that now, or hopefully here it is. Okay, awesome.
Guys, how are you? This is Alice Backer, the founder of Afro Crowd. I'm representing so many things right now. I'm representing Afro Crowd, Haiti, Haitian Americans, Brooklyn, the African diaspora, the Caribbean, the West Indies. There's no way I can do justice to all of those things in this one video, but Sherry did ask me to explain why it's important to edit Wikipedia. And I don't think I need to tell you guys, when you Google Wikipedia, sorry, when you Google anything, you're going to get the Wikipedia page almost at the top. So that's one good reason. Another good reason is, you know, why not put all of the culture, the history, and the knowledge, including the oral knowledge that qualifies to be on Wikipedia, why not just put it on Wikipedia so that all of the children of the Caribbean can find it when they're looking for it? Moins fier et moins content, je dis, que c'est avec drapeau haïtien ouais, que m'a parlé avec nous. C'est petit Haïti mieux, c'est petit 1804 moi, et donc moi content. C'est avec drapeau ça que nous t'ai commencé Afro Crowd. All right, I hope I've done enough to represent. M'espérer me faire tout le monde fier et m'espérer tout le monde a fait tout ça au capable pour yo apprendre ça au capable apprendre sur Wikipédia. Nous connaissons Wikipédia en créole haïtien. Nous connaissons Wikipédia dans pratiquement toute langue monde qui ni dans Caraïbes, ni en Afrique, et toute langue ça sur Wikipédia. Okay. Now, Sherry asked me to list 12 artists, 12 Caribbean artists. So I'm going to do that. I checked, and all but one of them, who actually was the first one I put on my list, are on Wikipedia. So I'm going to name all of them. And then, well, actually, maybe I should say the one who isn't on Wikipedia first. And that's, of course, Paul Beaubrun, who is the son and heir of the Boukman Experience family in Haiti. And it's kind of a scandal that he's not on Wikipedia yet. I checked, and there are plenty of sources, so he probably should be. And from Martinique, we've got Admiral T. From Martinique and Guadeloupe, we've got Kassav. All those guys are already on there. We've got Maxi Priest from Jamaica, Bob Marley from Jamaica, Shabba Ranks, Juan Luis Guerra from the Dominican Republic, Toto Vicente from Haiti. This is one of the people whose legacy where this is one of those people who kind of documented a lot of the a lot of Haitian folk songs. And she already is, although she is as a Haitian actor, and of course she did a lot in music as well. And of course, Timano from DP Express, and I checked, and he's on DP Express, he's on Wikipedia as Timano, his real name, of course, being Emmanuel Jean-Baptiste, also Haitian, and definitely a big contributor to Haitian compas music. Émile Michel is, of course, on there, and Tania Saint-Val is, of course, on there. Now, I'm going to be looking at this list years from now and thinking, I can't believe I left so many people out, but I could only do 12. And since it's late, the way I did it is I went to my music app and looked at who I am playing the most, my top tracks, And from the Caribbean, these were the top 12, which of course dates me. I am a Gen Xer, so you know, Gen Yers and Zoomers, make sure all of your favorites are on there. Special mention to David Rudder, and also to Rivani Précile, you know, who actually David Rudder is a boomer, and Rivani Précile is probably a Gen Yer, a millennial. So anyway, I'm doing my best. There's only 12. Most of these people are already on Wikipedia. The only one who isn't is Paul Bouin. So someone should, I know you're not editing Wikipedia today, but someone should go out there and do their best to edit Paul. This video is probably longer than what Sherry asked me. Please, guys, enjoy your day. Celebrate. Don't forget, I'm representing I'm representing Haiti. And m'voye un gros ti bye tout le monde. Guys, how are you?
Okay, so obviously I asked Alice to send in the video in hopes that we would have played it a little earlier. So I'm very glad that we were able to hear from the Haitian community, and I'm looking forward to hopefully connecting to Renzi before we're done today. But that's just a little bit from Alice Backer, who is from AfriCrowd. Now, we're moving on to the next portion of the show, which is we're going to be focusing. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention quite briefly too that we also have in the wings of the call, we also have Joel from the foundation as well, who is also a
wonderful. Yes, I was about to mention that. Yes.
Yes, and you know, of course, you know, very
Wonderful.
often we sort of to me, really, you know, the Caribbean, you know, also includes the Kingdom of the Netherlands, which is also quite important to note here. Being Jamaican, we have quite a bit of history with the Netherlands Antilles, especially Aruba, Bonaire, and Curacao. Curacao in particular, I mean, any Jamaican, you know, can tell you that, you know, this is, you know, perhaps one of the largest you know, communities of Jamaicans in the Caribbean outside of Jamaica. You know, so I just wanted to give a quick shout out there. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yes, and perfectly on time. In this portion of the day, we're going to be talking specifically about how you can get involved in the Wiki community. So you just heard from Alice, who is helping to represent AfriCrowd, of which I am a part. And we at AfriCrowd, we've been doing events every month for the last 5 years. Some sort of event somewhere in the world with a partner, or locally or online. Or it can also be in a different country, like we've gone to different parts of the world in that way. There are different community groups. There's another group called Black Lunch Table, which you can also get involved, especially if you're interested in the arts. Another group called Art and Feminism that we're connected to as well, that also focuses on women and feminism in the arts. If you'd like to get in touch with someone focusing on women who don't have pages yet on Wikipedia, for example, Caribbean women who may not have pages on Wikipedia. Women in Red is another great one. Rosie Stevenson Goodnight has actually connected with us in the past. Ian is helping to represent the Wiki Education. And I believe Brendan is also part of Wiki Education in another way as well, if you'd like to talk a little bit about that, Brandon and Ian. And we also have a really great option this year of being part of the many changes that are happening in Wikipedia. Wikipedia has been trying for years now to improve its representation and inclusion. The process isn't perfect, and the people from all over the world have come together to try and improve it. And one of the ways that we've done that is through strategic design groups. But before we go into all of that, let's hear from Joel Latang, who comes to us from Curacao, and I believe he's live, as Brandon just mentioned, and he's helping to represent diversity of the Caribbean that we've talked about is not only linguistic, but just to many different creeds and backgrounds and so forth. So Joel, can you please join us? It's great to know that you're also part of the Wikimedia Foundation as well.
Hi everyone. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the invite, Sherry. So happy
Great to see you, Joel.
I'm calling in from the Netherlands. I'm in the Netherlands right now. I have been living here for over 12 years. So I'm not from Curacao as of now, unfortunately, although I wish I was, but
but it's in your lineage, in your background. That's what I was pointing to. Is that right? Or am I wrong?
No, born and raised in Curacao, definitely. Born and raised.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah, that's what. So how do we say hello, how are you in Papiamento?
Well, first of all, thanks for pronouncing Papiamento, right, Sherry?
Okay.
Papiamento, we say hello, we say Conta by Kubo. How are you? See, yes. And something we say.
Let's practice. Let's practice.
Yes. Something we say endearingly to one another, no matter who you are, you'll say douchey, which is like sweetheart. Conta by douchey. Say it with me, Sherry.
Kodabai. Kodabai?
Contabay douchey. Yes.
Contabay
yes,
douchey. Okay. All right. My reception may have missed part of it, but and how do you say thank you? How do you say
Danke. You say danke. And you will put the
it sounds
you will put the douchey between.
It sounds like thank you.
Hold on. So you say douchey, you put douchey behind everything, and you're set.
Douchey?
Yes. So you say contabay douchey.
Oh, okay. All right.
Or you say danke douchey, and it's like, thanks, sweetheart,
Thank you, douchey.
Oh, Sherry. Yes.
Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, and can you tell us what's your favorite food from Curacao?
Oh, that's a tough one. So in Curacao, we do stews. Like our stews are life, right? And we have our national dish. Like one of our national dishes is called funchi. And funchi is like a polenta, basically, a cornmeal polenta. And you'll have funchi with fried fish. You'll have funchi with a stew, like a meat stew or a chicken stew, or a fish stew, if you may. And then, from the funchi, we mix like the cornmeal with, or wait, hold on. There's a separate dish called tutu. And tutu is the same as funchi, but we just mix that with black-eyed peas, or black-eyed beans, I should say. And that's called tutu. And that, I love funchi. I love tutu. Yeah. I love good food. I love good Caribbean food. So it's a very tough question, Sherry, because I love food.
No. But thank you. And also, what kind of music do they have in Curacao?
So it's funny. So we have a big subculture on the island. So the ABC island. So that's Aruba, Curacao, and Bonaire. And the ABC islands have a genre of music called ritmo combina. And ritmo, yes, ritmo combina. And ritmo combina is like it's a mix of different rhythms. So it's a mix of like zouk, cadence, merengue, caseco, and that's what makes ritmo combina, which means combined rhythms. That makes it the genre it is on the islands. We dance to it, and it's very popular on the ABC Islands. It's also popular here in the Netherlands with, of course, the people of the islands that we have here. Interesting fact, bubbling, if you know bubbling from, back in the day. We've had bubbling was made popular by one of our very own, DJ Morcha, who really gave bubbling. Right? Do you remember? Do you remember the bubbling days, Sherry?
Not sure if I had bubbling days, I'm afraid.
Didn't?
I had my soca days.
Right.
Bouillon.
But yeah, so we have ritmo combina, you have it slow, you have it a bit quicker, you have bubbling, which is still a thing on the islands. And then we just listen to a lot of like a mix of a lot of music. So reggae, salsa, merengue, kizomba, zouk.
Oh, yes. Good stuff.
Oh yes, we're big dancers on the islands.
You better speak about zouk now.
And we haven't talked about dances. That's one thing we forgot to mention much about is dancing from the island. I mean, you can't just you have to dance. You have to, even if you don't know how. You just have to when that music comes on.
Exactly.
It's
on the hips. It's all on the hips, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah. So, okay. Thank you so much for coming by, Joel. Kenny, if you wanted, I don't know if you wanted to mention anything there. But it's so great to know that we have somebody from the Caribbean who is a part of all that's happening with the foundation. So thank you for connecting with us. And do you have any shout outs you wanted to leave or anything like that?
Well, maybe I'll just shout out in my own language. Whoever will see this of my island will be able to say like, hey, I know that language. So I'll just say in Papiamento, ito ang honor, tata kinang awen noche, tapos ako piloy pamipura mira turbos nang, pamipura papium tiki over din mi isla, papium tiki over di Caribe, antomita spera ko e representação riba Wikipedia por sigi cresce, sigi wak nos idioma. And what I said is like, I was happy to be here, happy to see all of our Caribbean friends, and I hope on Wiki representation of our region and our languages keeps on growing. Thanks again for having me, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Ayo dushi.
Okay, and so wow, the day is just flying by. Don't you guys think it's doing quickly? So we're already at 4 o'clock almost hour. But before we get there, I was hoping. So I saw that Hadley Egla in the chat shouted out the Haitian community, Alice. Emma, thank you for the shout out. Also, Emma, thank you for being with us today. You've been such a great contributor. Don't you guys think?
I agree.
And it looks like, yeah. And also, so we had Gala and Renzi, we were hoping to join us around this time. Are either of them in the backstage?
Unfortunately, no. No, not right now. No.
Okay. But I do want to mention both Gala and Renzi are doing a lot in the community, the Wiki community. So we thank you so much for your contributions to carry knowledge on Wiki and for being part of WikiCari. Before but we thank you for wanting to participate. Talking about a few opportunities for involved. And so I'm going to be joined by my partner in crime for another project I'm a part of called News on Wiki. And it's Pete Forsyth, who has been a Wikipedian for a long time. And we're working on a project to get more Caribbean newspapers on Wikipedia, as well as Black-owned and local news from different states. And he's going to join us to tell that story. But in the meantime, gears. Maybe we can talk a little bit about the Caribbean or anything that anyone in the chat wants to talk about. So I'm going to leave it to you, Brendan, and I'm going to pop off and pop back in.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I just wanted to sort of dovetail, from what we were talking about earlier. I think just coming from the conversation we were having previous with Joel, something that came to mind was how much, and again, this is nothing that is new or unique to the Caribbean, but there are so many different forms and parts of the cultures that exist within the Caribbean that we might not necessarily get because of the fact that we have this sort of a gap in contribution between those pieces of information that exist on Wikipedia and those that should be represented on Wikipedia. And some of the comments here that we're seeing, it's really funny. I always reflect on the fact that in just passing conversation with a lot of people relating to the kind of work that Wikipedians of the Caribbean does. You always hear just all these very unique, and we've seen here even on the stream here, these very unique parts of the conversation coming through. And we're not really seeing that coming through in the language that, for instance, if someone goes and Googles something on an odd day, that's not necessarily what they're going to get. And one part of, and I just wanted to touch on this very briefly, one part of the conversation that needs to be had is that of how we can engage in not just the written, contributions to our history, but even in, submitting oral parts of our history. Oral knowledge is a very huge part of the Caribbean. It's something of which we partake in very often. It's how we mainly transmit different parts of our culture. So for instance, when we talk about, and I know Rubineri might have a bit to say about this, but I know that, for instance, all the excellent parts of, for instance, formerly, French influence, for instance, in Trinidad and Tobago, is something that is well known, for instance, in certain circles, but is not very much something that we typically speak about in the conversation about, for instance, what happens in the Caribbean and the fact that there are so many different parts that come together and create the community that we have here.
I think that one of the things that we desperately need to build upon is the world of oral history. There's so much out there that's not documented, that's not going to be documented in the literature. But there's so much in story, there's so much, I mean, the stories that Rubineri told about Begorata and Grosjean, it would be great. I mean, I there's nothing there. It's not in Wikipedia. It needs to be somewhere. And they're great projects. I would love to see, for example, some of the discussions I've seen on Wikispore, which is a very new project in the Wikipedia world about using it to collect oral histories and how you collect them and how you document them. And maybe they don't make it into the text of the Wikipedia article. Maybe they're linked to from it because, because we want to, if we want to keep the structures different. But there's so much world.
Okay, are
out
we
there.
hearing each other all right?
Yeah. There's so much world out there that a world to add to. And Joel, I just love the sound of Papimento.
Yeah, I think it's a crowd favorite actually. I think about, especially in hearing him converse, one thing that came to mind was very obvious influences of Dutch, for instance, which is perhaps one of the more obvious ones out there, but also a lot of Spanish. For those who don't know, of course, Papiamento, well, the ABC Islands are actually pretty close to the South American mainland, and for that reason, you will hear a lot of influence there in the language and in, for instance, things that they say or speak. But of course, within that is, again, the indigenous development of this language through, the course of hundreds of years of, interaction, thousands of years even. I mean, I for instance, I always make the point about, even in Jamaican patois, it's so funny to me that even though we don't, for instance, think about these influences, we, for instance, in Jamaican Creole, happen to have influences, for instance, of French, which is quite weird. So, for instance, there's an expression that we have, if someone's startled at something, just say "caca," which actually means something in French and actually means somewhat the same in Jamaican patois, and there are various other things that we say, for instance, the French word accoutrement is something that we use, and accoutrement we translate to accoutrements. Accoutrements means, things, various bits and bobs that you have about the place. And that's literally almost the same thing as what it means in French. Accoutrement is, all your different bits and pieces. So, again, the Caribbean is such a fascinating, such an interesting place because of the fact that it includes so much in such a small space. And, I can't possibly think of any other region that, has just such a rich diversity and such a rich, background of cultures all coming together, So, yeah, I also want to touch on pretty quickly that we're about to move into another segment. And thankfully, we are joined here by the News on Wiki group. We have, of course, Sherry is a part of this as well. And while we reconnect with Sherry, I also happen to have Pete Forsyth here. So I'm just going to welcome Pete. I think Pete should be here. Yeah, there he is. Right. So, Pete, I want you to touch on, what you're working on in terms of News on Wiki, from a broad scale, and then, sort of detail, for instance, what's been going on and what the engagement means for instance, those in the Caribbean, if you will.
Okay, sure. Yeah, thanks, Brandon. And I'm seeing in the chat, I think Andrew wants to have a bit of a break before the next segment, so I'll just give maybe a brief intro. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So basically, News on Wiki is a 6-month campaign. It's actually the second 6-month campaign that we've done. We did one in 2018 that was for the entire United States, and the main problem that it aims to address is the ability of an average person to figure out whether a news source that they encounter online is legitimate or not. So if they find something that's from the other side of the country, it's a newspaper they've never heard of before they really delve too deep into it, they want to get a sense of like, is this a real newspaper? Is this just a website that was launched last week? And so we're based on I'm getting a lot of feedback here. I don't know if it's just me. But I'll just keep talking through it. Our project is based on research that demonstrates that people actually will do a bit of basic research to find out if something's a real newspaper or not. But if they don't find an answer pretty quickly, they'll probably move on. And the number one thing they'll do, of course, is to do a Google search or a web search. Google and most search engines will actually draw information from Wikipedia if it exists and put it into a knowledge panel right there on the search results. So, you know, because of that dynamic, is this very easy thing that we can do, which is just to write a basic Wikipedia article for as many newspapers as we can, which will tend to help the public better assess whether a newspaper is real or not. And so in this phase, we're going to be focusing on the Caribbean among several. We have 3 specific topics, and newspapers of the Caribbean or concerning the Caribbean is one of those 3 major areas of focus. And so we can get into that a little bit after the break.
Absolutely. So we are going to take a very short break. And when we come back, we are going to talk a bit more about News on Wiki. We're going to touch on, in particular, the engagement with the Caribbean community, and also how the Wikimedia community is also looking to engage even further with the wider world and also the Caribbean. So stick with us, guys.
Great.
Yeah, we'll take a 90-second break. You can stretch your legs. We'll play some nice music. That'll make Sherry very happy. And we'll see you in 90 seconds, and you'll be all great and fresh to hear Pete's great news about his project. All right.
Cool.
Going great, everyone. Oh.
Thanks.
Okay, can you guys hear me all right? Had some technical difficulties. Can you guys hear me?
We're
Yes.
still live.
Okay, great. Okay, for some reason I wasn't hearing you guys, but whenever you're ready, I'm ready to jump back in.
We're live still, I think. This is officially the break, but we're talking and everyone sees us. So hello, everyone. Please enjoy your break.
Do we have that awesome music that was playing earlier?
Yeah, where's the music?
I'm not sure where the music is. Let me see if I can bring it back with the music. Oh, here we go. Question. We can answer questions. We articles. Oh, don't get us started. We absolutely should have more audio and video, but we have an interesting culture about video and audio. We'll probably talk about because it is very important for the oral tradition or oral citation. Good question.
That was perfect. That was perfect. All right.
All right, we'll stop that.
Oh, great. So I was seeing that we've had some people commenting as well. And it's so good to see how many that we still got some eyes here this late in the day. So thank you so much to everyone who's stayed with us the whole time. And after the festival is over at 5 Eastern time, we are also going to be having a seminar on News on Wiki. It's free and open to anyone who's interested. If you go to our meta page, event page for today, and you scroll to the bottom at the 5 o'clock hour, you'll see the link, which is a Zoom, which will connect you with myself and Pete Forsyth, who we have here as a guest right now. Thanks so much for joining us, Pete. I was mentioning earlier, Pete and I have partnered for something called News on Wiki, which is in its second iteration for 2020. It's a 6-month campaign. We are going to be focusing on getting more information about newspapers on Wikipedia. So the first time around 2 years ago, it started as a project that spanned all of the United States. And now we're getting a little bit more specific and focuses on some more specific sample areas. And this time around, we're looking at local, we're looking at papers in states. Right now, we're looking at Washington State. We're looking at regions, and so that's where the Caribbean comes in. We're hoping to get more information about Caribbean newspapers. And also, we're looking at Black-owned newspapers. So that's more of a demographic area. So we're focusing on Black-owned newspapers as well. So those are the 3 areas for the next 6 months. And we're holding a seminar just about every weekend, of which this weekend is a part, after the festival is over.
Sherry, you're still there? We dropped you. Oh, well, why don't we just have Pete go ahead? Because I think she was just introducing you, right, Pete?
Okay. Yep. Sounds good to me. So, so I'm going to maybe give like sort of a 5-minute intro or so. Is that about good for the time slot that we have? Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so News on Wiki, as I was just describing, this is a campaign that we ran in 2018. We ran for the entire United States in 2018. The goal of it is to get more information about newspapers on Wikipedia, and the primary reason for that is to help the general public better assess whether a newspaper that they run across on Facebook or YouTube or whatever is legitimate, or whether it's just some fly-by-night website that was just put up. So by putting something on Wikipedia, that information will then get pulled into Google. It'll get displayed in a Google knowledge panel when people do a Google search on it. So that's really putting the information right where it's most relevant to people as they're making that basic assessment. And so in the initial round, we focused on newspapers across the US. This time we're doing 3 different topic areas, as Sherry was just describing. So Washington State, Black-owned newspapers, and newspapers of or concerning the Caribbean. And this is actually, of those 3 areas, that's the one that's the least familiar to me. So I've been just kind of, getting caught up on Wikipedia's content about Caribbean newspapers. One of the things that Sherry and I have discussed in the early stages is how there are a number of newspapers in the United States that are focused on audiences of people from the Caribbean. And so we're really wanting to focus on newspapers like that. And just doing some basic searches on Wikipedia, I can't easily find any coverage at all of newspapers like that. So I was able to find a list of newspapers in the Caribbean. And when I was just doing some basic Google search, I found there was a paper called Dominican Today, about the Dominican Republic. I got that when I did a search on New York City. So maybe it has a presence in New York City, but then when I actually went, there is a short Wikipedia article about it, but it says it's in the Dominican Republic. So even there, I kind of came up short. So I think we really have a fair amount of work to do in getting that kind of information on Wikipedia, and also in organizing the pages that Wikipedia already has that relate to this topic. That's one of the things that we've really found, is that there might be an art, like for Black-owned newspapers, there's an article about African American newspapers in the United States. There's also a list of African American newspapers. There's also a list for each state of Black-owned newspapers, but they're not necessarily tied together all that well. They don't have their see also sections don't always link to the best related material. So that's another kind of thing that we'll be working on in this project, is just making better links within Wikipedia, making sure that things are clearly tied together, so that people are really able to find the information that is out there on Wikipedia. So I could go on, but if you guys have any questions, or if there are any questions for the audience, I'm happy to go that way as well.
No, it's a fascinating topic, and I'm glad you're doing that project. As Pete knows, I was a journalism professor for many years, and trying to find definitive lists of news organizations is not easy, because even we're looking at the page on Wikipedia for list of newspapers, like even the term newspapers is kind of outdated, right? It's like, do you need to be a paper publication or a daily to qualify to be in these lists? So even our vocabulary is not consistent or robust enough, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's the same for the Caribbean too. And also, when you're thinking of notability, and the ability to write more articles about the Caribbean, you're going to need sources. And a lot of times those are newspapers. And if the newspapers from the Caribbean are not recognized in the wiki community as notable or as reliable, sorry, not notable, but reliable, then that also is a problem for those of us who'd like to see more information about the Caribbean included. So it's kind of a win-win in that situation as well. So we'll be talking more about that after the festival, starting right after. We're done at 5, and give you a few minutes to get in there, and about 5:10, 5:15 we'll be getting started. So if you're interested, please go to the meta page and scroll all the way to the bottom. I believe we can put that in the chat, or you can just find it at using the bit.ly, bit.ly / WC hyphen fest, FEST, all lowercase, and scroll to the bottom of the schedule at 5, and you'll see the link there to join us. Thanks for coming by, Pete.
Sure. Yeah, could I just make a quick comment on
soon.
Yeah, could I just make a quick comment on notability, just to respond to what you were saying? I think Sherry's audio is dropped out.
Go ahead.
So just real briefly, there is as far as notability goes, people may be aware Wikipedia has a general notability guideline that determines what articles merit a Wikipedia article, and then there are more specific guidelines for specific topic areas. So like, athletes, like there's a specific guideline for, if you're a professional athlete in certain leagues, that you're automatically assumed to, that you could have a Wikipedia article about you. So the criteria for newspapers are actually pretty basic at this point. So one of the things that we've done in this campaign is we've drafted a more detailed list of notability criteria. It's not at all official yet, but one thing that I would really encourage those tuning into this call to do would be to explore that. And if you have feedback on it or additions, if there are criteria that you think are important, especially if you can back that up with some kind of an article or citation expressing it, that would be really helpful in kind of moving that forward towards hopefully becoming an official Wikipedia guideline at some point.
And you can catch up with us online too at NewsWiki1 on Twitter. So hopefully we can stay in touch. All right, and we'll include our more information on the meta page as well. So I hate to rush on, but I know we have at least one more guest before we close today, and it was wonderful having Pete on. So we have Medard Przarki, who's coming from the Wiki Strategy 2030 campaign, and I was excited to be able to have him on because he can talk a little bit about the transitions that are happening in the Wiki community. And I believe we already have him on.
Yes.
Medard?
Hi, everyone. Danke dushi.
Hey, good to see you.
Okay.
Hi,
everyone. I'm so happy to be here.
It's good to know that you were listening with us earlier.
Definitely. What a great talk.
Thank you for coming. So,
food, photography, diversity, geography, Wikipedia. It's been great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. So I've been busy with a group that Medard helps lead that's been working to improve the transition process for some of the new things happening in the Wiki community in the coming years. And they gathered people from all over the world to kind of help represent as best they could the different parts of the global community of Wikipedia. It's not perfect, but it was good to see that there were people from everywhere kind of invited to be a part of a wider look at some of these changes and hopefully help communities input into what these changes will be, or if any tweaks need to be made to be able to voice their opinions about it and so forth. Can you tell us a little bit about that process and some of the things that are coming down the pike and ways that people can be involved in that?
Absolutely. I would be more than happy to.
Okay.
I'm actually wondering if I can share my screen. Before that, again, thanks for having me. These are really exciting times. Movement strategy has been in the pipeline for quite some time. I mean, we haven't had a strategy for some time. And then the strategic direction came together in 2017. And then since 2018, we've been trying to draft these recommendations. And as much as it's been about the recommendations, it's also been about the process that's brought a lot of people together, working groups from all over the world. And a lot of emphasis on online communities or project communities, active online editors, and also a lot on areas of the world where we need to grow. I think back in 2015, there was this realization that unless we change some things, we may no longer be a top website, because the way people consume energy, the way people consume knowledge, and then the way people contribute knowledge is changing rapidly. And so we need to address the technological and demographic changes. And so a lot of focus has actually been in areas where we're not so present, and the Caribbean is definitely one. So I really appreciate being here today. And what a great time. We literally just yesterday made the announcement on Wikimedia L inviting everyone to start prioritizing from these recommendations, and over the next few months create this plan together. And it's been great having Sherry on the call with us. From her perspective, and with everything going on in the world, it's been a real blessing to benefit from her knowledge, and also just the design group itself. That I will quickly share my screen. Great.
And also something I should mention is that it's something that they're inviting everyone who has interest to discuss. If you go to the page, you'll see that there is an option to kind of start talking about what the recommendations are, and how they fit into, we want to make sure that the Caribbean is on the map. In many cases, the Caribbean hasn't even been listed on the map when we go to Wikimedia events. So that's something that's changing because of groups like this. But there's so many more voices throughout the United States, for example, which I also help represent. Every city, every town, and obviously every person represents different ideas. So it's quite a feat to try and get everyone's ideas fit in there. But how often do you get an opportunity to at least put the word out there of how you feel about different changes that are being made in something that you're a part of? So this is an opportunity to see what these different items are, and add your voice to it. Almost like we're talking about voting a lot in the United States right now. So this is an opportunity to voice your opinion about some things that are happening. So with that, I'm just going to let Mehrdad finish. I can talk and talk and talk, but Mehrdad?
No, that was spot on, Sherry. It's the Caribbean community is huge, as we saw just Joelle coming in from the Netherlands. There's the Caribbean region where we need the information, the knowledge, the community, but there's also the diaspora all over the world. And so there's really something in the recommendations for everyone to connect to, whether you like the organized part of things and you want to be involved in decision-making, in resource allocation behind the scenes of the Wikimedia projects. There are plenty of options for that. If you're like, no, that's not for me, I like more tech. I want to connect with the tech communities. I want to work more on user experience. I want to be involved in internal knowledge management. Maybe you love to curate. Maybe you're an archivist. There's really something for everyone. And there's a lot to choose from. And previously, we heard a lot from communities that, strategy is very high level. We actually in January, had a salon in Haiti, and their input was super useful for helping us finalize recommendations in March. So we've heard from communities all along. Sometimes we heard that, the recommendations are really high level. It's hard to connect with them. Well, here is now the opportunity to really bring it down and be like, okay, let's say starting January 2021 for the next 12 to 18 months, what do we want to work on? And so we're making it really simple. And as guided by the design group, start local, start relevant. And so, yes, we have the recommendations as mentioned. There is something interesting for everyone to choose from. And we also have the 10 principles, and there's a lot of collaboration. There's a lot of regional identities. There's a lot of growing and connecting. There's a lot of mentorship opportunities for more established, more resourced affiliates to work with and connect with the newer affiliates. And so we had the recommendations. It was a 2-year process, 2 major community consultations through that. And then we released the recommendations back in May. As mentioned, about 100 different Wikimedians came together at different points to write and draft the recommendations. And so we really wanted to figure out, how do we actually implement these? There are 10 recommendations and something like close to 50 different initiatives that they put forward. And we know that this can't all be implemented at the same time. So we brought together this group of 18.
By the way, what is...
Absolutely.
What is a
Go ahead.
recommendation? Just to make it clear, when you say recommendation, what do you mean?
Okay. So we had this strategic direction set in 2017 that we want to be the essential infrastructure of ecosystem of free knowledge, and that we're going to focus on knowledge equity and knowledge as a service. And I've been listening for the past hour and a half, and there's been a lot of talk of diversity, knowledge equity. So I think this is really, really well aligned with that pillar. And so the recommendations were thought of steps to get us there. And so there are 10 of them. And I will share the link to the page. And so there are 10 recommendations. One is about the sustainability of our movement. One is about user experience, safety and inclusion. These were ideas that people thought, okay, if we focus in these 10 areas, then we can address the knowledge gaps and the content and contribution gaps that we need to address, and also really grow and strengthen as a movement. There is equity in decision-making. There is coordination across stakeholders. Some of these needs are internal, like invest in skills and leadership development, and some of them are external, like innovate in free knowledge. There's been a lot of things have happened organically in our movement, which is amazing. But as Wikipedia turns 20, some of these things need to be put into structure, so then you always know who to go out to, who to reach to, or if a GLAM partner wants to partner with us, there's a proper way to follow. Previously, a lot of connections were just, you knew somebody, they knew the other person, you would connect, and this is wonderful. But sometimes if that person leaves, then there's a gap. And this has happened all over the movement. And so these recommendations were seen as ways to address that. There are 10 recommendations, and each recommendation puts forward a few ideas. So altogether, there are about 50. And really, there's something interesting for everyone. Whether it's advocacy, whether it's organization, whether it's skill development. Maybe you're not a contributor yourself, but you love organizing. Or maybe you're an activist for everything from panorama rights to, or maybe you love working with GLAM partners. There really is something in the recommendations for everyone to choose from. And so now we're really piloting this choice.
Galleries and libraries. Yeah.
Exactly. And so this is the design group that came together this summer. We were lucky to have Sherry as a representative of North America, but as mentioned, the Caribbean usually comes along with North America, but perhaps in the future it can really have its own identity. Because there's the Latin America, there's IberoCoop, it's quite developed, and then there's North America. And it's really nice to see the Caribbean blossom as such a diverse region, but also, as we've heard, so influential from cuisine to music. And so this is where we are, September to October. At the local level, this is where people prepare. This is when they prioritize. Also, for anyone from the affiliates out there listening, this is also the time for the annual planning. So it's really great timing as you are, whether it's applying for a rapid grant for a first time or events, or whether you're applying for an annual grant program. This is a great opportunity to see what you want to work on in your own community, in your own region for 2021. So yeah, focused events now, preparation, small, and then global events. We all come together in October and November. And our thinking is that probably afterwards, we'll go back to our communities and discuss these decisions. And then as of January, we'll start a plan. And originally, we were thinking a 1-year plan, but with everything going on in the world, that's at least 18 months for now. just so people have more time to really experiment. Some things I'm sure will happen globally, and we're already seeing this in the Wikimedia movement, like the Universal Code of Conduct. There's a great idea for a global council, and this is something that's been going on for many years in Wikimedia. And so there's opportunity for that, but there's also opportunity for people to experiment locally and regionally, and I think the Caribbean is in a great position for that. So yes, please think with your communities, get together, have a call. For some groups who have unspent money from canceled in-person events, you can actually use this to have a virtual meeting. We're really stressing facilitation and documentation so that everyone can speak. This was something we realized in the design group, how to organize a really good call so everyone puts their voice out. Also have the opportunities for on-wiki involvement from people who can't join the calls. And really start local, start relevant, see what matters to you in the recommendations. And over the next few weeks and then a few months, we'll come together globally to see what we want to implement. And 2021, we start. I know that was a lot, but really, actually, we
this is also recorded, so we can rewind it if you need to in the future.
All of this has been summarized in a one-pager that I'll share the link here. Perfect.
That's awesome. There's so many things happening, and it's great that the voices from the Caribbean can be included, voices locally to different parts of the world can be included. Like I mentioned before, it's not perfect, nothing can be, but it's great to see that there's been an effort to reach out to different communities from different places. So thank you so much, Merdad, for being here. It looks like you've were watching us for a little while today, so appreciate it as well. Wow, it's so great to see everyone who's hung on. We're about the same as we were about an hour or two ago, so this is great.
This is commitment, energy, passion.
I can't believe. What's that?
I said it's energy, passion, and commitment.
Yeah, and you know what? That's right. When you care about something, the time just flies by. And it's great to be around people who care about the Caribbean and who care about the communities of it and the knowledge of it, and also about Wikipedia and being a part of that community as well. And I think sometimes people forget that it's yes, it's a website. It's the depending on what statistic you use at, the 5th or 6th most viewed site on the planet, or I guess in the United States at least, I think it's number 5 or 6. So and internationally, I think it goes down to about 7. But you know what? It's also a group of a large community of thousands of people, and it's edited by millions of people. So I think when you've got a phenomenon that big, that next year turns 20 years old, so we're still pretty young, I guess for the internet we're middle-aged, but 20 years is a short time to make such a big difference. And so today, I hope that people who have joined us during this festival, first of its kind, hopefully we'll do it again next year, will have a good taste of what that community is. And Merdad, thank you for helping to kind of show us how it's growing and developing and how we can be a part of it, and also helping to make it even better. Hopefully we can continue for the rest of the 27 minutes. Wow, 27 minutes we have left today to kind of share our thoughts about the events anything that we can talk about concerning the Caribbean, and plans to you saw of you will well. It doesn't stop here. Obviously, from what I was saying, there's a lot going on that you can jump into and really make a difference, because after this year, I think they shut the door on these changes. So if you really want to be a part, you might as well check it out. It couldn't hurt. And also, you can join us at the end of the year. We have events all the time. Just getting started, so they're not like we have them often, and we're so excited for things coming up. And we'd love to connect with more of you who are in the Caribbean as well as in the diaspora. The diaspora, you know, the Caribbean is quite unique and prolific, and we're all over the place. So if you have an idea of something that you want to do with Wikimedians of the Caribbean, then now would be time to talk about it. We can so much for joining us. I hope that you enjoy your weekends, and thank you also for coming back and reviewing we've had today. So what's on Barbie? And what would you like to talk about first?
Yeah. So yes, I was having just a sorry, I was just having a bit of difficulty, but what I think you know, what we were actually just about to talk about was the fact that you know, just to sort of summate you know, what the event would have culminated into. Um, you know, I think what's most important and what I got from, you know, all the conversations that we've had here, you know, everyone from, you know, Ruben Deary's, you know, most fantastic exhortation, which mind you, I'm still reeling from. Um, and, you know, going all the way down to, you know, talking about Merdan's presentation in regard to what's been going on with, you know, movement strategy and where we're moving on to, and how the Caribbean very much is in a moment where we need to take that initiative and really start taking the initiative and really become part of the movement, a tangible part of the movement. You know, I couldn't have asked for a better forum to sort of bring to mind and bring to, you know, before these kinds of things, especially because again, we're in a situation that, you know, that's most peculiar, like, you know, COVID-19. And so for that reason, you know, we're seeing here where there's so many parts of the experience, and I'm sure many of us here on the, you know, on the stream who from different parts of the world can relate to, you know, the various granular aspects of our experience, you know, coming through lockdown and the gradual reopening, and some of us have gone back into lockdown and somewhat, you know, we're not able to see as much as we would like to those various parts of the experience, and that, you know, is just a small part of the broader issue that we see here. And, you know, I just want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you to Ian. Thank you to Ribadiri. Thank you to Andrew. Thank you to Richard. We're in the background and have been wrangling, you know, this show for its entirety. I mean, you know, Wikipedia Weekly, we want to thank you all for hosting us. I also want to say thank you to Sherry as well. Of course, Sherry, you know, is we're trying to reconnect with her as well. But, you know, I just want to say thank you to everyone for having, you know, come and been a part of this really amazing experience where we've all been, you know, pitching and sharing and, you know, just really having a really amazing time. I think I see Sherry right there. But, you know, again, you know, this has been such an amazing moment. And I just want to note the fact that as soon as we're finished here with this stream, there is another stream that is going to be happening with News on Wiki. And I also want to mention the fact that as Pete and Sherry had mentioned, News on Wiki will be focusing on certain you know, print media and also even digital media in the Caribbean, those different news sources, and working on issues relating to the legitimization of these sources in the Wikimedia community and the wider academic community even. So that starts at around 5:15, 5 o'clock, but really get started at 5:15 Eastern Daylight Time or Atlantic Standard Time. If you are on Eastern Standard Time, like I am on, or Central Daylight Time, that would be at around 4 o'clock and starting at 4:15. So you should be able to access that information for that specific Zoom call. It's up on the screen right here. I'm not gonna list out what the actual link is. You can jump into the call. Jump into the Zoom right there. The link is provided on the screen. But I just want to say thank you again to everyone, and we are probably gonna take it out from here. This has been 3 hours and 15 minutes of very, very invigorating conversation. So what we're going to do is we are still going to implore everyone to continue to have a look at the focus areas / ideas for editing. That will continue to be moved over and sort of contributed to as time goes on. But of course, we want you to stay in touch with us. Go to our user page on Meta. I'm not sure if we have that up, but if I will just glide over to that really quickly. And you should be able to see here, right, the Wikimedia to the Caribbean user group. Of course, we are among many other groups, active in trying to bring to mind and bring to light the conversation and the rich history, cultural diversity that exists in the region, and connect with us. We have an email address that you can reach out to. I think it's listed here. And also, if you want to reach out to us, individually, all the different leads in the organization, our email addresses are available here. And yeah, I think that about covers it. So again,
just before the end, one more thing. Mm-hmm. I really think it's important to stress, come here, well, after you create your Wikipedia account, if you don't already have one, come here to the Meta page and join us. Stay in touch. We can use this to talk about not just organizing like this. We can use this to talk about how can we improve Wikipedia, how can we beef up the Caribbean Wiki project on Wikipedia, how do we organize to improve Wikidata. We're just a small part of the movement. We need a lot of people, we need everybody to get involved and stay in touch and do something to improve Wikipedia, because Wikipedia is only going to represent the voices of the Caribbean and the perspectives of the Caribbean when the contributors are from the Caribbean. And this is where the world is.
Yeah.
So please, please help us shape the way we are perceived in the world.
Yeah, and much again for everyone who came. Thanks so much for everyone who contributed. Thanks so much for the Wikipedians who have been at work, even as we have been editing, have been talking today. And I hope that we will hear from a number of you in the future. And this should not stop here. We should keep it going. So I can hear the music is starting. One thing I wanted to say is that, this is recorded, so you'll get a chance to see it from start to finish. But I also wanted to big up, like Brandon did, Andrew Lee and Richard Nightbill. Richard and Andrew have been amazing throughout all of this. And we just thank you so much for putting together a wonderful show, keeping us technologically working, especially me, since I haven't been doing so great technologically at the end of this. But thank you for keeping us floating and for giving us some extra time. Andrew actually was on.
Oops. Well, there goes the technical part. But no, I'm so impressed with what you folks have done. I mean, it has been an engaging, believe it or not, like 3 hours, if that's possible. Yeah. It didn't feel like anything was slowing down. So.
I mean, quite a few bits we've seen, the time slipping us by, but I'm just really excited that we got to cover everything. And just having that real representation of all the various parts of the experience is just what I hoped to have got, out of the experience, and that is what we got. And I couldn't be more thankful. So thank you guys again, and I think we're gonna close on out now.
Yeah, and thanks for the audience for being there. I mean, it's amazing how many folks were here for pretty much the entire time. We hope you learned something, because the StreamYard system that we're using is fairly new. You can feel like just by watching, you're on the cutting edge, whether it was on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. The fact that you can chat back to us and we can put your comments on screen and we can react to them, regardless of where you are and what platform you're using, that's pretty powerful in itself. And so we really thank you for being part of the show. It really added so much more to see that feedback in terms of music, food, attitudes about what we can be improving in Wikipedia. So thanks a lot for that. Pretty powerful in itself. Yep. And so we really thank you for being part of the show. So Sherry, you just said goodbye. You want to say your final goodbye to everyone? All right. Bye, folks. Thanks, Ian, for being here. Thanks, everyone.
Alrighty, guys.
We're gonna
have a good one, everybody.